Another day, another banger. As highly requested from all of you, I've recapped all 3 seasons of Reacher. So without delay, this video is quite large, so sit back, relax and enjoy the recap. It's the dead of night when a man sprinting through a tall grassy field is shot by another man with a silenced pistol. He collapses almost instantly. The shooter approaches, picks up the shells, beats up the corpse for some reason, and then, very professionally, covers it with some random cardboard lying around, though the feet still stick out. Rain is pouring like hell when a man steps off a bus near the entrance of a town called Margrave. He heads straight to a diner for some breakfast, black coffee and peach pie. But before he can even take a single bite, the cops show up and arrest him for murder. Can't have shit in Margrave. At the station he's bombarded with questions but stays dead silent. The receptionist runs an ID check, revealing that the Chad before them is none other than Jack Reacher. The case falls into the hands of Oscar Finley, the chief detective, who brings Reacher into the conference room and lays out the gruesome details of the murder, hoping to get a few words out of him. But Reacher doesn't budge. Frustrated, Finley tries to appoint him an attorney, but Reacher refuses, finally breaking his silence. Roscoe Conklin, the cop at the reception, runs a full background check and finds absolutely nothing. No social media, no driver's license, no records. The only proof that Reacher even exists is the fact that he's sitting in their conference room. They do find records of his parents, both deceased, and his only brother, who was in the military Secret Service. Reacher himself was ex-military too and led the 110th Special Investigations Unit. In the conference room with Finley, he casually deduces that the murder was done by 3 men, breaking down the crime scene with highly detailed observations that leave Finley speechless. He also mentions that his reason for coming to Margrave was Blind Blake, a popular blues singer who supposedly died there. Finley tells him he'll only be cleared if they can prove he was on the bus at the time of the murder. He also mentions that the victim had a scrap of paper in his shoe with a phone number and the word pluribus written on it. Finley orders to lock Reacher up while they investigate further. In his cell, Roscoe offers Reacher a cup of black coffee and subtly hints that she thinks Reacher is innocent. He doesn't even get to finish his drink before Finley rushes off with Roscoe, saying they've got a lead on the phone number. Turns out it belongs to a nerdy banker named Paul Hubble, who invites them inside his home. The moment Finley mentions the murder, Paul spots a black car outside his house and immediately starts sweating bullets. He panics and instantly confesses to the crime. Finley and Roscoe quickly realize he's bullshitting. Paul is terrified, but he clearly didn't murder, since he confesses to things that never even happened at the crime scene. Paul is brought to the station while Reacher is taken outside for a briefing. As usual, Reacher overwhelms Finley with how much he's figured out just by observing people for 5 seconds. Since Paul won't talk, Finley makes a decision to throw him into prison for the weekend with Reacher to force something out of him. At the prison, an officer named Spivey is in charge of assigning their cells. But instead of sending them to their designated cells, Spivey, being a deliberately places them in a block full of lifers, knowing full well they'll be in danger. Paul immediately becomes a target, but Reacher keeps an eye on him. Eventually, Paul spills that he's just a currency manager who got tangled up in some shady financial scheme and was threatened into silence. If he messes up, his family's safety will be in jeopardy. Later in the showers, a group of 4 guys specifically target Reacher. Big mistake. He beats the absolute hell out of them with ease, but is left wondering why he's being targeted. The guards eventually break up the fight and send them back to their proper cells. Meanwhile, Finley, who is dealing with his mess of a life mainly because his wife left him, leaves her a voicemail. Roscoe interrupts with some interesting news. She got access to Reacher's military records, and the man is basically a walking legend with an insane list of accolades. Back in his cell, Paul tells Reacher that he's way more important to whatever operation he's caught up in than he initially let on. Reacher in turn realizes that he's now a target too. Spivey and the guys in the showers weren't random encounters. Somebody wants him dead. Once they're finally released, Roscoe picks up Reacher and tells him they found video proof that he was on the bus during the time of the murder, officially clearing him of suspicion. Reacher, however, is still thinking about how Spivey tried to set him up. He tells Roscoe he plans on leaving town ASAP, but Roscoe asks if he'd like an early dinner with her first, to which he agrees. Before heading to dinner, Roscoe gets him some fresh clothes and drops him off in town. As Reacher walks around, he notices a black pickup truck tailing him for a bit before driving off. Shrugging it off, he stops by Mosley's barbershop for a shave. Mosley fills him in on some local politics, explaining how the Kleiner Foundation pretty much owns Margrave, with most businesses running under their name. He also mentions that the current mayor is the grandson of Casper Teal, who has a bronze statue in town. And then, right on cue, that black pickup truck returns, and the driver is none other than Kleiner Jr. or KJ. He steps out and mentions how Reacher has brought trouble to their town and warns him to watch his back before driving off. Reacher brushes it off and heads over to Roscoe's for dinner, but their plans get wrecked when another dead body turns up. Finley stops Reacher from going anywhere and takes him to the investigation room, where Reacher listens to the details of the victim. As the body is described by Jasper, a forensics expert, something shifts in Reacher's expression. He starts listing off details about the body as if he knew them personally. And that's when it hits: this victim is Joe Reacher, his brother. Reacher absorbs the news like a champ, but it's clear this is personal now. Things get messy between him and Finley again, but Roscoe steps in and cools things down. Sitting in the back of Roscoe's car with Finley, Reacher swears that he's going to find every single person responsible for Joe's death and kill them. Back at the police station, Reacher wastes no time. He gets out of the car and walks off without a word. Finley, already exhausted, orders Roscoe to tail him and make sure he doesn't do anything reckless. She follows in her cop car, but Reacher isn't having it. He tells her he doesn't need a babysitter messing up his investigation. His plan is to head straight to Paul's house and demand to know why he confessed to a murder he didn't commit, especially now that Reacher knows the victim was his brother. Roscoe figures it out and tags along anyway, trying to keep things from spiraling out of control. At Paul's house, his wife Charlie anxiously welcomes them in. She's been waiting for Paul to come home and has no idea where he is. Reacher gets straight to the point that his brother Joe was murdered, and Paul's phone number was found in his shoe. Charlie is thrown completely off guard. Before Reacher can press her further, she takes her daughters Lucy and Tally to bed. Seizing the moment, Reacher asks to use the restroom but instead sneaks into Paul's room and starts searching. He finds a small Burr Agrimony hitchhiker stuck inside Paul's shoe. That's all he needs. Without a word, he heads back out, quickly says goodbye to Charlie and takes Roscoe with him. As they drive, Reacher pieces it together. Paul is on the run and whoever he was working for wants him dead. He shows the burr to Roscoe, explaining that it only grows in the tall grass around Margrave. They decide to check the crime scene for any matching burrs but don't find any. Still, they pick up a few small details that could help. Later, Reacher checks into a motel, but trouble follows. A group of delinquents paid off by KJ show up looking for a fight. Roscoe watches as Reacher breaks their hands, making sure they never lay a finger on him again. Meanwhile, 4 men in white coveralls show up at a house in the dead of night. Whatever they're up to, it's nothing good. The next day, Reacher heads to the station for updates, but Roscoe rushes out to meet him with news that Police Chief Morrison was murdered last night. And not just murdered, his body was stuck to a wall and parts were missing. Brutal. It's clear now whoever's after Paul is behind this too. Reacher tells Finley and Roscoe that Morrison must have been working with the same people Paul was tangled up with, revealing what Paul confessed to him back in prison. That morning, Mayor Teal conveniently appointed himself acting chief in Morrison's place. Teal calls an emergency town meeting, but before Reacher heads there, he and Roscoe check Paul's house again. Still no sign of him. Charlie is worried sick, so Roscoe decides to stay behind to protect her and the kids, sending Reacher to the town hall in Charlie's car to see what's going down. At the meeting, Teal fails to command any real authority and no one listens to him. But then Kleiner Sr. steps in, smooth-talking the crowd and winning them over with his words. Finley asks Teal for permission to cross-reference the murders, but Teal shuts it down immediately, making both Finley and Reacher certain he's hiding something. Reacher also finds Kleiner Sr. way too suspicious and plans to dig deeper into him. Meanwhile, Finley calls his FBI contact Picard to take Charlie and her daughters into protective custody. After picking up a burner phone, Reacher runs into Mosley, who warns him that 2 Spanish-speaking men came to his barbershop earlier asking about him. With that in mind, Reacher hurries back to Paul's house and tells Roscoe and Charlie that Picard is on his way to take them somewhere safe. He also bluntly tells them they need to assume Paul is dead and start packing now. Stepping outside, he spots a familiar car parked down the road. The second it drives off, he rushes back inside, urgency in his voice. They need to leave now and that danger is closing in. Right on cue, Picard arrives, nearly giving everyone a heart attack before taking Charlie and the kids to safety. With them secured, Reacher turns his focus to Spivey, the corrupt officer who had Paul thrown into the worst block in prison. If someone paid Spivey to set Paul up, they're likely pulling the strings behind everything. Reacher calls Spivey, pretending to be Finley, and tricks him into agreeing to meet. Later that night, he waits outside a bar, but Spivey isn't stupid. He figured out the ruse and brought backup. The same 2 Spanish-speaking men from earlier try to take Reacher out. Bad move. Reacher takes them down effortlessly, but before he can squeeze any answers out of Spivey, the cops show up. He slips away, but he's left with nothing, no new information, no leads. Back at the station, Roscoe patches up Reacher's wounds while revealing what she dug up. Joe had been working for the Secret Service's Homeland Security Division. The problem? No one knows exactly what he was investigating. Reacher tells Finley he's going to track down Spivey's address and handle him personally, but Finley shuts him down, insisting he'll take care of it. With no other moves to make, Reacher heads to a bar for a drink. Finley, worried he'll do something stupid, asks Roscoe to tail him and make sure he goes back to his motel. Instead, she joins him. After a drink and a slow dance, the 2 step outside, only for rain to come pouring down. The road back to Margrave is flooded, so they decide to stay the night at the motel. Lying in bed, Roscoe tells Reacher about the town's history, how the Conklins originally built Margrave only for the Teals to steal it from them. It's a rare quiet moment between them, a glimpse of vulnerability before they drift off to sleep. The next morning, they return to Roscoe's place and immediately sense something is off. Her house has been broken into. Whoever did it wasn't just looking for anything, they were looking for Reacher, since Charlie's car, the one Reacher had been using, was parked out front. Someone was tracking him. They clear the house, but just as Roscoe closes the door, her stomach drops. There, carved into the back of the door, is a message: "See you soon." It's clear that whoever is after Reacher isn't done yet. They're coming back. "It's about time my man got a gun." Roscoe is furious at the audacity of whoever broke into her house and tried to kill her. She hands Reacher a gun that once belonged to her superior, Captain Gray. Gray had no real family and Roscoe was the closest thing he had. They were tight before he allegedly died. Now she's trusting Reacher with the gun so they can work better together. Reacher tells her to pack her bags and leave because her house isn't safe anymore. But before she can respond, she gets a message that an ID was found on a body. They pull up to the station and brief Finley. The victim's name is Pete Jobling, a trucker for South Freight. He was arrested in 2018 for a traffic violation that escalated into disorderly conduct, but his legal fees were mysteriously covered by Zacarias Perez LLP. As they step outside, Roscoe gets a call from Molly Beth, a specialized administrative officer with the Secret Service. Reacher takes the phone and drops the hammer that Joe, her superior, was murdered. Molly starts crying, but Reacher pushes for information while he has the chance. She reveals that Joe was the director of the Office of Investigations, working to stop counterfeiting. She also promises to pull Joe's case files so they can dig deeper. They set a meeting. Reacher's hunch about counterfeiting is spot on. Finley points out that it's suspicious how Paul worked as a currency manager for Axis Financial's Atlanta branch. With that in mind, they split up. Finley will track down Spivey now that they have his address, while Reacher heads to Zacarias Perez LLP to dig into Jobling. Meanwhile, Roscoe returns to the station and pretends to focus on Morrison's case to avoid suspicion. While at her desk, Stevenson approaches her and mentions that Paul and his entire family have gone dark. He asks if she knows anything, but they don't get to talk for long. He's called into Teal's office. Finley arrives at Spivey's house and knocks, no answer. He doesn't waste time kicking in the door and searching the place, but Spivey is gone. He does, however, find Spivey's phone with several recent calls to Kleiner Industries. Before he can make sense of it, he's caught up in a Looney Tunes moment. Two cops from the Alton PD bust in, mistake him for a burglar and start beating the hell out of him. Meanwhile, Reacher arrives at Zacarias Perez LLP. A little force gets him Jobling's files. Later, the trio meet for lunch to exchange info and all signs point to Kleiner. Reacher and Finley decide to pay him a visit. At the Kleiner warehouse, Reacher immediately clocks a few red flags. No security cameras and an excessive amount of animal feed being unloaded. Inside Kleiner's office, things get tense fast. Kleiner refuses to give them anything useful and instead hurls insults at Finley and Reacher. The meeting ends with them being escorted out and them now even more convinced Kleiner is hiding something. After making an enemy out of Kleiner, Reacher tells Finley to stop staying at his house and start bouncing between motels if he wants to stay safe. Finley packs his stuff and Roscoe shows up too. Right now, they have 3 leads: Paul, Spivey, and Jobling. Reacher figures Spivey is their best shot at getting answers and decides to check out Blue Cat, the bar where he last saw him. They plan to meet in Hickory, but before that, Roscoe makes a quick stop to pick up some personal care items. As she steps out of the store, she spots Kleiner Jr. leaning against her truck, blocking the driver's side door. He's clearly trying to flirt, but his borderline illegal riz is failing hard. He then tries to plant a seed of doubt in Roscoe's head, telling her that Reacher killed innocent civilians during his deployment in Baghdad and used his connections to walk free. She gets progressively angrier, but Kleiner Jr.'s creepiness only goes away after she shoots him a death stare. He tells Roscoe he's looking out for her, but she knows exactly what kind of guy he is. Uncomfortable as hell, she finally drives off. Meanwhile, Finley arrives at Axis Financial's team building event, where employees are gathered for drinks and socializing. He approaches a woman named Debbie Shane, introduces himself under a fake alias, and claims he's considering transferring to the Atlanta office. When he asks about the currency management department, Debbie tells him it was dissolved after their guy, Paul Hubble, suddenly vanished a year ago. After getting what he needs, Finley heads to the company bar, but a woman desperate for some action tries to strike up a conversation. She's clearly waiting for something to happen, but Finley isn't interested and shuts it down immediately. Over at Blue Cat, Reacher starts looking for Spivey. He bribes a guy for info, but another man, one of Spivey's friends, steps up and tells Reacher he won't be getting anything out of them. In typical Reacher fashion, he beats the guy's ass and learns that Spivey left town with some Spanish dudes. Reacher steps outside and spots the same black Chrysler from before parked nearby. Instead of confronting them immediately, he heads back into the bar, grabs a pair of gloves, and then drives off, purposefully letting the car follow him. The rain picks up as he leads them onto an off-road path, pistol at the ready. Deep in the tall grass, Reacher slows his car and jumps out while it's still rolling. He hides in the brush, waiting. Sure enough, the Spanish guys get out of their car, guns drawn, thinking they've got him. But this is above their pay grade. Reacher takes them both out from behind, quick, clean, and efficient. Searching their bodies, he finds some useful intel. Then he pops open the trunk of their car, and there he is, Spivey, dead, shot straight through the head. Reacher drags the bodies and dumps them into the trunk of their own car. Finley calls, asking if he found Spivey, but Reacher lies, saying he hit a dead end. Finley then drops some interesting intel. Paul had been lying to his wife and hadn't worked at the bank for over a year. On top of that, they've got leads on the rental car Joe was using, which was later burned to the ground. Reacher heads to the location where Finley is already waiting, and Roscoe shows up moments later. The VIN on the car is tough to make out, so Reacher awakens his inner scientist and grabs some ketchup and salt to reveal the numbers on the burned frame. When Roscoe asks how things went with Spivey, Reacher tells her about the 2 Spanish men who killed Spivey and how he took them out in self-defense. He also makes it clear he wants to get rid of the evidence so neither the cops nor any other authorities interfere. He takes Roscoe to the bodies, and once there, she asks him about what happened in Baghdad. Reacher lays it all out. He was deployed in a small village 40 clicks north of Baghdad, where a group of kids used to play football. They always waved at him and he always waved back. One night, when it got late and they still hadn't gone home, he went looking for them, only to find them being attacked by 3 men from the village. Reacher killed those men and saved the kids. Roscoe asks how KJ even knew about this. Reacher says the Kleiners have money, and money buys information. His words put her doubts to rest, and they head to the airport to dump the bodies. At the airport parking lot, Roscoe successfully parks the car with the bodies inside. Reacher brings up something that's been bugging him, that the Kleiners are unloading an insane amount of animal feed for a company that isn't even in agriculture. This animal feed thing better be important later on, or there will be consequences. Afterwards, the duo pull up at a hotel and get a room. Inside, Reacher tells Roscoe they'll be meeting Jobling's wife in the morning to see if the same person who killed Jobling also wanted Joe dead. Moments later, Molly calls saying she's compiled most of Joe's files on the case. Roscoe tells her to meet them at 5 Point Station to hand them over. With that, Reacher goes to take a shower and is joined by Roscoe. The next morning, they head to Pete Jobling's old place, but learn that he moved to Brookhaven with his wife, Judy. His parents give them the new address and they take off. Meanwhile, back at the station, Teal calls Finley into his office, chewing him out for disrespecting Kleiner and making it clear he won't hesitate to fire him if he steps out of line again. Right after, Stevenson walks in, telling Finley he's got a call from his father. But it's actually Picard passing along coordinates for a meeting spot. Before heading out, Picard hands his gun to Charlie in case she needs to defend herself and her daughters. At Jobling's new place, Reacher and Roscoe meet Judy, who is completely unfazed by her husband's death and didn't even take his last name. She openly admits he used to steal AC units from Kleiner and sell them on the black market for easy money. She always knew he'd piss off the wrong person one day, and well, here they are. She shows them the AC boxes he used to bring home, adding that every time she questioned him about being late or not answering his phone, it led to fights. Eventually, she just stopped caring. Poor girl. As they leave, Reacher gets a call from Finley, who shares Picard's meetup location. But something clicks in Reacher's mind. Jobling wasn't transporting AC units. Those boxes were probably filled with counterfeit cash, and Jobling had been skimming off the top before delivering them to Kleiner. At the meetup, Picard hands over intel on the burned car's VIN. Turns out Joe rented out that car and stayed at a motel, both under the alias Ron Hassey. Picard gives them the motel address, and Reacher and Roscoe go check it out. The receptionist confirms that Joe did leave behind a briefcase and a garment bag, except they were picked up by Ron Hassey himself just 20 minutes ago, which is insane because Joe is dead. They rush outside and check a dumpster where they find Joe's garment bag. Inside is the other half of the note found in Joe's shoe. Before they can process that, a car suddenly pulls up and 2 men open fire. A different pair of South American men start shooting at them. Reacher tells Roscoe to run in the opposite direction, luring the attackers toward him. But Roscoe realizes Reacher sent her the other way to keep her safe, and she's not having it. She turns back and runs in his direction. The attackers crash their car and Reacher takes the chance to kill one of them, but his gun runs out of ammo, leaving him at the mercy of the second guy. Just as it looks like things are over for our main character, Roscoe swoops in and saves his ass. On the way back, Finley calls for an update. Reacher and Roscoe tell him they found some info but also got ambushed at the motel. That's when Finley realizes that Stevenson was the one who forwarded Picard's call to the mainline, meaning someone in the police force is working for Kleiner. Later, the trio meet at an abandoned farmhouse, piecing together both halves of the note. It spells out e unum pluribus, which translates to out of one many, but the actual saying is out of many one. The note also mentions Gray's Kleiner files and Jobling's garage, along with a few phone numbers. They start dialing. One number belongs to William Bryant, an economics professor at Princeton. Another belongs to Stephanie Castillo, also an economics professor. Both are currently at a European conference and won't be back for 3 days. The last number happens to be the Memphis office of the EPA. That one catches Reacher's attention and he wants to dig into it ASAP. But for now, Finley insists meeting Molly is the priority. Reacher calls his military friend Neagley, asking her to look into the number labeled JW. The 3 head to 5 Point Station to meet Molly. They see her stepping off the train, but as they wait near the escalator, she never shows. Too much time passes. Something's wrong. They split up to look for her. Reacher heads down the escalator and spots Molly's bag on the train tracks. He follows the tracks into the tunnel where he finds her, bleeding to death on the side. Reacher, Roscoe, and Finley drive off after their mission fails. Finley says they shouldn't have left Molly's body at the station, but Roscoe reminds him that Margrave's police are dirty, making it too risky to do anything. Reacher asks Finley to drop him off at Paul's place so he can get himself a new ride. He's pleased to find a Bentley Flying Spur waiting for him. On his way back to the station, he stops by the roadside and randomly talks to a cow. I don't even know what to say here. Anyways, as he walks back to his car, he notices the same kind of hitchhiker stuck to his pants as the one he found on Paul's shoes. When Reacher pulls into the station's parking lot, he sees Roscoe's truck vandalized with the word sprayed on the side. Furious, he speeds off to the one place KJ, the main suspect, is likely to be. Reacher pulls up to a restaurant and finds KJ with Dawson. He sits down with them, barely holding back his anger. KJ tries to play it off as a joke, but he has no idea who he's messing with. Instead of backing down, he calls Roscoe which earns him a bitch slap from Reacher. A full-on fight breaks out and Reacher beats the hell out of KJ's guys, but Roscoe, Finley, and Kleiner show up in time to break it up. Things get even worse when Roscoe gets a call from Teal, who fires her on the spot for a complete bullshit reason. Finley says he'll talk to Teal to get her reinstated, but that doesn't help her calm down. The trio regroups to figure out their next move. Reacher says the only thing left on Joe's list that they haven't looked into is Gray's files. Roscoe tells him Gray didn't leave anything behind before his death. Reacher gets curious about the box Gray's pistol was in and asks to see it. Inside, he finds a hidden push-in button that reveals a key. It leads them to a storage chest Gray left behind at Mosley's place, full of files, folders, and journals, an invaluable find for them. Setting aside the cows and animal feed for a moment, Kleiner had bought the loyalty of Margrave's citizens with the Kleiner Fund, making him untouchable in their eyes. While Gray's files aren't enough to take Kleiner down, they give the trio a new angle. As Reacher and Finley discuss why Kleiner set up shop in Margrave, Roscoe has an epiphany. Gray didn't just die, he was murdered. A bit later, Reacher gets a call from Neagley. She has information too sensitive to share over the phone, so he heads out to meet her. He finds her without trouble, but she had already committed the crime of eating cereal at a diner. They move to a park where she reveals that the JW on Joe's paper was Jimmy Wilkes, an EPA investigator. He was gunned down in his home. Neagley describes his murder, which is eerily similar to Joe's. A cop from Memphis named O'Coin had Wilkes' case before the FBI took over. When Neagley contacted him, he told her he'd been waiting 5 years for someone to call about it. O'Coin and his partner Ribideau agree to take Reacher and Neagley to a low-level hitman who might know who was hired to kill Wilkes. Also, Reacher brings up the animal food thing again for like the 4th or 5th time. Meanwhile, Roscoe asks Jasper to pull up the pictures of Gray's body so she can examine the wound on his head. Jasper zooms in, revealing a diamond pattern which tells Roscoe everything she needs to know. At the same time, Reacher and Neagley find out that Kleiner first destroyed the town of Chester before moving on to Margrave. Roscoe storms into the station and punches the shit out of Teal before Finley pulls her away. Now, Teal knows that Roscoe and her crew are onto him, and while what she did was justified, she can't stay in Margrave anymore. Too many people there know her. That night, Reacher and Neagley meet up with O'Coin and Ribideau. O'Coin is eager to help, but Ribideau is cautious and refuses to come along. Finley takes Roscoe to a motel while O'Coin and Ribideau take Reacher and Neagley to a club to meet the hitman. He tells them that the one who killed Wilkes was an out-of-town assassin called the Viking. On their way back, Reacher gets a call from Finley. He tells him about the Roscoe-Teal situation. Stevenson warned Finley that Teal wants Roscoe arrested. Roscoe tells Reacher that since Picard can't look after Charlie and her daughters forever, she's going to take care of them herself. Finley also mentions that Gray's files didn't have everything they needed, so he plans to sneak into Kleiner's office to look for more. Things seem fine until Ribideau suddenly pulls a gun on O'Coin, saying they will torture his family if he goes through with this. Reacher and Neagley tell O'Coin to take his gun and shoot Ribideau, but O'Coin hesitates, unable to believe his own friend has turned on him. Then, shit hits the fan. Ribideau shoots O'Coin dead and turns his gun on Reacher and Neagley, promising them a quick death. Reacher kicks Ribideau's seat from behind, making it impossible for him to control the car. They crash into a river. Reacher demands to know who Ribideau is working for, but he only says they have accents. Reacher gives him a choice: get saved now and die in prison later, or die right here. Ribideau chooses the latter. Reacher and Neagley swim to the surface, dumpster dive for some clean clothes, and talk. Reacher tells Neagley to walk away from the case to stay safe, but this is personal now. She's not backing down. She heads back to Memphis to dig up more on the Viking while Reacher returns to Margrave. Later that night, Finley sneaks into Kleiner Industries' warehouse. There's no security, so he breaks in easily. He finds some files, but when he steps into Kleiner's office, he discovers something much worse. Kleiner lying in his chair, dead. Guess there's always a bigger fish. Kleiner Sr. wasn't the mastermind after all. From the way Kleiner was killed, Reacher figures out that the South Americans involved are from Venezuela. Kleiner had been working with someone from there, someone strong enough to take down the guy they thought was the mastermind. Moments later, Finley gets summoned to the police station and ordered to prioritize Kleiner's case. Speaking of the Kleiners, KJ storms into the station, furious. Consumed with rage over Finley's earlier accusations against his father, he tries to punch him but fails. After cooling things down, Teal tells Finley to wait a bit before working on his currently assigned case. Meanwhile, Reacher heads to a body shop to get his windows tinted and gets a loaner in the meantime. He pulls up to Mosley's barbershop in his sick new ride to pick up Finley. At the same time, Picard brings Roscoe to the place where he's keeping Charlie and her daughters. He tells them he has to go and will check in within a few days, leaving Charlie and the girls in Roscoe's hands. Reacher and Finley set up a stakeout near Kleiner's warehouse, keeping an eye on the delivery trucks. After waiting for a while, they spot Kleiner's nephew Dawson getting into a truck and driving off. They follow him. At the lodge, night falls. Charlie sends her daughters to bed, but Roscoe spots something she does not like: a car parked outside with 2 men inside, definitely sent to kill them. But how did they even find this location? Roscoe grabs her gun and warns Charlie. If she hears her yell, she needs to take her daughters and run deep into the woods. Back on the highway, Reacher and Finley keep tailing Dawson's truck, but things take a bad turn at the lodge. Roscoe leaves to investigate the attackers, but steps on a stick, snapping it and giving away her position. The Venezuelan hitmen immediately start chasing her. She runs back towards the lodge, screaming, "Run!" Charlie grabs her daughters and bolts into the woods. Roscoe sends Charlie and the kids ahead, promising to meet up with them later. She comes under fire but manages to shoot one of the men in the leg, taking him out of the fight. The second guy is harder to find because he's hiding well, but not well enough. He pulls out a C4 with a countdown timer, ready to throw it at her. Roscoe fires at the tree he's behind, causing him to drop the explosive in panic. The guy loses his nerve, and in his panic he seals his own fate. With the threat eliminated, Roscoe heads to meet up with Charlie. Meanwhile, Dawson stops at a motel, parking his truck, giving Reacher and Finley the perfect chance to inspect it. Reacher climbs on top and cuts open a hole in the vinyl top. The sound alerts Dawson, and he comes outside to check, but Reacher and Finley manage to hide in a way that makes the whole thing look straight out of a cartoon. Once Dawson heads back inside, Reacher informs Finley that the truck is empty. They have no clue why that Baldy was driving around with an empty truck, so they decide to call the economics professors from Joe's punch list. They try William Bryant's number first, only to find out he was murdered just hours after his flight landed back in the States. Hoping the other professor is still alive, Reacher dials Castillo. She picks up. He tells her he's on his way to New York, and if she wants to stay alive, she better do everything he says. By morning, Roscoe finally meets up with Charlie and the kids before heading to a diner to meet Picard and fill him in. In the meantime, Reacher flies to New York while at the diner. Charlie drops a bombshell that she already knew Paul left his job at Axis Financial and was deeply involved in this mess. She finally spills everything she knows about how Kleiner manipulated Paul into working in his counterfeiting scheme. One day, Kleiner called Paul into his office, offering him a very important and highly profitable job. He had a major client in Venezuela and wanted Paul to come along to see how they operated. Paul agreed, landing in Venezuela with Kleiner, completely unaware that he was already trapped. Kleiner lured Paul in with an irresistible salary, then made sure he couldn't escape by threatening his family. And if that wasn't enough to keep him in line, seeing a man get crucified and then tortured right in front of him definitely did the trick. Just as Charlie finishes telling Roscoe everything, Picard pulls up at the diner and takes them with him. Reacher lands in New York, gets suited up, and immediately gets spotted by the ops. He heads to the police station, where he tells Castillo to wait for her safety. Lying to the receptionist, Diaz, he claims he's a lawyer and that Castillo is his client. Diaz takes him to her room, and Reacher gets straight to the point. Castillo reveals that she and Bryant were the only 2 academics in the US who specialized in mass undetectable counterfeiting. They never advertised their expertise, but they helped Joe when he needed their knowledge. According to Castillo, all that counterfeit cash fuels drug, arms, and human trafficking abroad. If a fake bill is good enough to be used, it's called a super bill. The dyes, holograms, and ink can all be replicated, but the one thing these counterfeiters didn't have was the right kind of paper. Joe made sure they couldn't get their hands on it. Only one company in the US had the statutory authority to manufacture that paper. But despite these measures, Joe still found super bill operations in Georgia. Reacher realizes he had it all wrong. The money wasn't being manufactured in Venezuela and smuggled into the US, it was the other way around. He gets up and tells Diaz to keep Castillo in custody until he hears from him and him only. Diaz agrees, and Reacher makes his way back to Margrave. But he doesn't get far before another Venezuelan hitter comes after him. The fight takes a little longer this time, but in the end, Reacher still handles it and walks off like a nonchalant Giga Chad. Stevenson is at his home with his pregnant wife, talking to her about how difficult his job has gotten when the 4 men in white overalls get inside his house and do what we're all expecting. Reacher lands back in Margrave and fills in Finley on everything that he found out in New York. Before they can head back to the body shop and get his Bentley, Finley makes a stop at Kleiner's funeral, but not without getting threatened there by Dawson. They head to the body shop to find that the slow-ass mechanic had only gotten 2 windows tinted. A young boy working with the mechanic sees some spilled oil, and the mechanic asks the boy to dump some kitty litter on the spill to cover it. Reacher gets very interested by the ingredients and this application of the kitty litter, but at the same time, Finley gets a call from the police department that Stevenson and his wife were found dead in their home. This murder was brutal in its own way because Stevenson had his wife tortured in front of him while the killers put mirrors all around them, so there was no way for Stevenson to not be able to see his wife in pain. Did I mention that his eyes were forcefully taped open? Insane. Teal is also at the crime scene, and he calls Reacher and Finley out before dropping some news. Teal fires Finley because he's not up to the task, or whatever the hell that meant. All the allies getting fired one by one means that they don't have easy access to information anymore, and Jasper is their only hope. Finley plans to break the news of Stevenson's death to his parents. Finley heads his way, but before that he tells Reacher to see what he can find at Paul's place. Reacher tells Finley that he'll check it out for sure, but before that he needs to take Baker, the cop who arrested Reacher in EP1, the last cop in Margrave, to lunch. Isn't it a little suspicious that Baker is the only cop that isn't fired or killed? Reacher and Baker sit down at the very diner they had their first meeting, and Reacher lies about trusting Baker so he can get what he wants. Baker is a little suspicious of Reacher for telling him all that info, but Reacher keeps up his lies and makes Baker believe that he really trusts him. Of course, Baker is also in on this counterfeiting scheme and needs to be taken out as well. But not before Reacher can get some use out of him. Reacher tells Baker that he's going to break into Paul's house and search every corner of the place to find something that connects Paul to Joe's death. This is basically an invitation to the killers so Reacher can teach them a lesson. Reacher then goes to a store to gear up and get ready to handle trouble. At night, Reacher arrives at Paul's house, turns the TV all the way up and gears up. And Finley goes over to Stevenson's parents' house to break the news to them. Reacher hides outside the house and waits for his enemies to walk in. The same car with the same 5 people shows up, but this time we can see their faces clearly. Dawson, along with 3 Venezuelan guys and a driver, pull up to Paul's house, and everyone but the driver breaks into the house as Reacher watches them from the bushes. Reacher quietly kills the driver, and the remaining 4 guys search the house looking for Reacher, who is one step ahead. Reacher calls one of the guys outside with the car's high beams and takes him down as well. 2 of them are also taken out, but the last one, Dawson, spots Reacher and the main fight begins. Dawson happens to be Reacher's strongest opponent so far and gives him a real tough time. Dawson knocks Reacher into the pool with a crowbar and tries to drown him, but Reacher regains consciousness and tries to swim to his gun as he's being strangled by Dawson. After much struggle, Reach does manage to take his gun and kill Dawson, putting an end to those gruesome killings in Margrave. He takes all the guns from the killers and puts them in the trunk of his car. After taking a much-deserved shower, Reacher figures out the whole plan and relays the info to Roscoe. Since US dollars are all the same size, Kleiner had $1 bills come in from all over the country, get their die and printing removed without harming the paper itself, and get those blank $1 bills turned into $100. The wastewater from this whole thing ruined Chester and its lake, and it was being hidden by animal feed. Oh my god, the animal feed was actually important. After seeing how kitty litter was used to clean an oil spill, Reacher realized that it contains diatomaceous earth, which is an absorbing coagulating agent used in animal feed. Kleiner used the diatomaceous earth from the animal feed to clean the chemical waste from his counterfeiting business. The counterfeit bills are pre-1990 without the security chips and whatnot, and then they're beaten up to look old so no one bats an eye. Roscoe tells Reacher that if they plan to take down this whole operation, they need the fake cash as evidence. Reacher plans to head to Jobling's house again to see if they missed anything. Since Picard is also with Roscoe, she tells him how Reacher has gotten extremely close to the truth. Reacher calls Finley to meet him at Pete Jobling's house so they can close this case once and for all. But as soon as Finley picks up the call, some hitters are sent to his motel to kill him. Finley informs Reacher of the situation and he gives Finley step-by-step instructions on what to do to save his ass. Finley obeys Reacher like a good boy and ends up driving away from his motel alive. Finley arrives at Pete Jobling's house in the morning, but the ops had already gotten wind of that and burned the whole building down, trying to keep as many things as possible from Reacher. It is then that Reacher notices an incredibly small detail that saves him. In Joe's punch list, the apostrophe on Jobling's was always after the S, which means that Joe is referring to Pete Jobling's parents' house and not the house that just burned down. Reacher and Finley head over to the other Jobling's house and start looking around their garage. And without much trouble, they manage to find one of those AC unit boxes filled with counterfeit cash. Reacher tells Finley to call Picard and meet them at the farmhouse where he parked his Jaguar. Now that they have everything they need to take down the Kleiners and Teal, Reacher loads up the cash in his car and heads to the farmhouse. He gets a call from Neagley, who informs him that the case of Wilkes' death was undertaken by some FBI agent Nitmo who didn't take the case seriously and brushed it under the rug. But considering Nitmo's physique, it wouldn't be wrong if he had the nickname the Viking. But Nitmo had died of cancer 3 years ago, but his partner is still with the FBI, and that partner is none other than Picard, which becomes clear when Reacher arrives at the farmhouse and sees Picard and KJ pointing guns at Finley while Teal stands aside. This one scene is enough to tell the entire story of this season. Teal unarms Reacher and Picard tells Finley how he's the type of cop who goes where the money is. Picard was most likely the one who leaked the location of the lodge, but things look even worse when KJ pulls up a video of Roscoe saying that if Reacher does not do what he's told, Kleiner's men are going to do the same things to Roscoe and the girls that they did to Morrison. Teal doesn't want to kill Charlie and her daughters, so KJ plans to silence them after torturing Paul in front of them. Turns out that Paul is not dead and is out there hiding somewhere. Reacher thinks that the client in Venezuela hasn't been getting their cash due to the blockades, which is why the Kleiner industries are under pressure and that those Venezuelans will kill KJ just like they did with his dad. But KJ corrects Reacher that it was he himself who killed his own dad. He then reveals that he is the mastermind behind all this because his father had the brains to start this entire operation but didn't have the guts to keep it running, so he killed him. KJ was the one who killed Jobling, he was the one who killed Molly. and he was the one who killed Joe Reacher. There is no way this brat is making it out alive after saying that last part. KJ then sends Picard with Reacher to go and find Paul so that he can be traded for the ladies, and if he doesn't do this by 6 a.m., those girls are going to die horribly. Reacher asks Picard if they can pull over to get a map so he can have better odds of finding Paul. They stop by at the same diner, and Reacher is able to come to the conclusion that Paul is in Augusta, but Picard doesn't buy it. As soon as Reacher's coffee and pie arrive, he spills the coffee onto Picard and secretly picks up a fork which he sneakily uses to puncture the tire of his car before leaving. Finley gets his ass beat inside the holding cell by Baker, and Reacher gets a low tire pressure warning on his car's HUD and asks Picard if they can stop and replace the flat tire. On the way to the boot, Reacher surprise attacks Picard and shoots the devil. This gives Reacher time to drive off to nearby motels near the Augusta bus stop, and eventually he manages to find Paul. In the car ride back to Paul's house, the two of them exchange info and get each other up to speed on the whole situation. Paul is important to KJ for the counterfeiting scheme, but Reacher has no plans of handing him over. Reacher takes Dawson's truck and slams it straight through the entrance of the police station, smashing Baker against the cell and giving him a painful death. He frees Finley and Paul and shortly pulls up to pick the two of them up. The men get their hands on the guns and ammo from the station, and Neagley shows up as well. The four of them go to Mosley's house for planning, where Paul shows them the layout of the counterfeiting warehouse. All of them arrive at the warehouse, and it's the beginning of the end. Reacher siphons some gasoline from the car, and they take out the security on the outside. Reacher takes the bottle of gasoline and dumps it all at one of the gates, and Finley ignites it, instantly starting a massive fire. Paul's only job is to make sure he gets his family out of there alive, and the rest of them head inside. Chaos ensues inside, which gives Roscoe a hint that Reacher is there to save them. The fire starts engulfing more and more of the warehouse, and Kleiner's men start picking up their guns too, turning this into a massive shootout. Reacher uncuffs Roscoe and Charlie. Roscoe escorts Charlie to the outside, allowing them to shoot freely now. Somehow, Picard managed to avoid death and shows up at the warehouse out to kill Finley. It's Picard versus Finley, Roscoe versus Teal, and Reacher versus KJ, the best matchups one could think of. Finley shoves his thumb into Picard's fresh bullet wound and pushes him under a hydraulic press, crushing him to death, while Roscoe cuffs Teal to a pipe and shoots him dead with the gun Gray left behind for her. The smoke inside the warehouse reaches dangerous levels, so Finley, Neagley, and Roscoe group up and head outside, leaving just Reacher and KJ inside. Reacher and KJ exchange a few shots but both miss. Reacher runs out of ammo in his pistol and decides to cut open some bags of animal feed to create a distraction for KJ while he hides in the smoke waiting to jump him. KJ takes the bait and Reacher unarms him, making it a fist fight, something he greatly excels at. He makes a mess of KJ before pushing him into the fire and burning him to a crisp. The warehouse finally gives up and Reacher rushes out before he makes it impossible for himself to escape. Despite everything that was thrown at him, he took it like a champ and kicked the asses of everyone who dared stand in his way. He is Jack Reacher. Reacher comes out from the warehouse and has a moment with Roscoe as the scene cuts to the next day, where the two of them discuss what the future has in store for them. Reacher plans to leave Margrave and Roscoe doesn't stop him. Roscoe herself plans to rebuild the town that her family, the Conklins, built. Before leaving, Reacher goes out to meet up with Finley at a diner. These two are not good at showing emotions at all, but at least they stop fighting and share a nice bro moment together. Finley's plan is to quit being a cop and go back to Boston and possibly remarry after losing his wife Sharon to a fatal disease. After a good few weeks of trying, Reacher finally gets to taste that peach pie he was always being denied, which has to be the thing that most people would have been waiting to see. Reacher bids farewell to Joe and heads on his new journey wherever life takes him. In the freezing cold Catskill Mountains, a helicopter flies over the woods during the night. As the helicopter flies over the woods, it drops the body of a man, which falls and lands on the snow. Not sure if the snow was enough to soften the impact though. Our main character is looking homeless as ever as he buys himself some clothes at a thrift store but doesn't have enough cash to cover it. Reacher heads over to the ATM across the street and spots a woman with bloodied hands on the verge of tears making a withdrawal. Reacher connects the dots and realizes that she's in trouble. He notices a car to his left and asks if she's being carjacked. The woman replies in agreement and mentions that her son is in the back seat. Reacher heads over to the car and beats the shit out of the carjacker, saving both the woman and the child before heading to the ATM to make his withdrawal. After getting his cash, he glances at the receipt and sees two amounts disguised as a distress call. $1.10 and $1,030, meaning 110th, 1,030th, 1030, meaning that help is needed. He heads back inside the thrift store and uses the cashier's phone to make a call to his private investigator friend, Neagley, who has to bear the bad news of the murder of their friend Calvin Franz from the 110th Special Investigations Unit, which Reacher led. Neagley asks Reacher to head to New York and Reacher leaves ASAP. Back when Reacher newly formed the 110th Unit, he cherry-picked his members for the skills they had. Reacher thought Franz was very, very smart and took him into his unit. And Franz also looked up to Reacher a lot. Other than Reacher, the unit consisted of Neagley, Franz, David O'Donnell, Manuel Orozco, Jorge Sanchez, Tony Swan, Stan Lowry, and Carla Dixon. Reacher tells them to tidy up the office and sees just how uncoordinated these people are. Even he's not sure if they'll be able to work together, so he decides to treat them all to beer. 2 years, 7 months and 19 days since the Margrave incident, Reacher lands in New York and meets up with Neagley at a diner, who briefs him on the situation. Franz had a wife Angela and a son Mikey too. Lowry, another member of the 110th, also passed away in a traffic accident 2 years ago in Montana. Reacher and Neagley head on their way to meet up with Angela, Franz's wife, to ask her some questions. As they leave, a bald guy in a black Ford spots Neagley and Reacher leaving the diner and circles their names on a list of all the remaining members of the 110th. Another guy in a car who has a scar on his face spots those two and informs his superior that Neagley met up with Reacher. On their way to Angela's place, Reacher leaves a voicemail for O'Donnell, sending a distress call. At Angela's place, things get emotional, but she pulls herself together and lays out the entire timeline of events. Angela and Mikey were away while Franz was most likely working on a dangerous case. Franz went missing, and when Angela returned home, she found that the entire place was ransacked. She gives the duo the keys to Franz's office, which was also broken into. Before leaving, Mikey says the 110th slogan, "You do not mess with the special investigators." And oh, is it true? The guy who reported to his boss earlier calls his boss again to inform him of the hotel that Reacher and Neagley checked into. His boss tells him to keep an eye on the two. Reacher and Neagley arrive at Franz's office and see that the place is absolutely trashed, and under all the stuff they find the 110th's group photo. In the keychain to Franz's office, Neagley notices a mailbox key, and there happens to be a post office right across the street. The two of them head towards it, but it's past operating hours, so they plan to come again the next day. With the remaining members of the 110th unreachable and nothing else to do, they head to their hotel and let off some steam. Back when Reacher offered to get everyone beers in the officers' club on the first day the 110th was formed, things were insanely awkward. Like meeting your online friends in real life for the first time, kind of awkward. A man comes over, mentioning how low-rank personnel like Neagley at the time were not allowed to drink there. Things escalate and it turns into a full-out brawl between the 110th and the members of the 91st. The 110th leaves the club and gathers around a campfire with music and beer, doing a fine job of breaking the ice and letting everyone get comfortable with one another. That was the same night the 110th slogan was born, and they took that group photo. Elsewhere, a man under the alias Adrian Mount checks in at the LA airport and burns his fake passport to erase all evidence. The next day, Reacher and Neagley head to the post office and try to find Franz's mailbox. Since they don't know which one it is, they have to try quite a few before finding the right one, which has all his mail. They exit the post office and find a flash drive, but they are unable to check its contents because of a port mismatch. Neagley leaves to get an adapter while Reacher takes her car to the hood to acquire a gun from a drug dealer. Stealing is okay if you do it from the bad guys. That alias guy from the airport meets up with two passport forgers to get more fake passports and kills them, making sure his identity doesn't get leaked. Neagley and Reacher return to their hotel rooms to find out that they have been ransacked, just like Franz's home and office. They get their guns but find that it is none other than O'Donnell inside. O'Donnell had already found their rooms in that condition and mentioned how he came to their address as soon as he got Reacher's voicemail. Neagley plugs in the flash drive only to be met with a password that has a time and a guess limit to crack it. After much brainstorming and wrong guesses, the password turned out to be the name of the person he respected the most, Reacher. That fake name guy uses another alias, this time Andrew McBride. After unlocking Franz's drive, the gang prints out the files. One of them is a list of names with the same initials A and M. Two of the names on that list were ones that the fake passport guy had already used. Another file they got from the drive was a list of random numbers, which doesn't make any sense to our trio for now. O'Donnell mentions that they need more manpower, so the gang goes to Swan's house to meet up with him, but Swan doesn't answer the door, which worries them. Reacher breaks the glass on the door and unlocks it from the inside, only to find that Swan's not home and that his dog has died. Poor doggo. Reacher assumes that Swan is dead and that there's someone hell-bent on taking out the special investigators. Reacher, Neagley, and O'Donnell leave Swan's house and try to get in touch with the other members of the 110th, but Reacher spots the same black Ford from before and comes to the conclusion that they're being followed, so he goes over to introduce himself, Reacher style. Reacher goes over and knocks the bald guy inside the car unconscious, not knowing that he's actually an NYPD officer named Gaetano Russo, who is an officer investigating Franz's murder. Major Reacher, more like Major Screw-Up. Since they've made enemies of the NYPD now, they need to stay out of sight and keep it low-key. When O'Donnell called Sanchez and Orozco, both of their voicemails were full. Another bad sign. Reacher says that they'll go to Atlantic City and try to find Sanchez and Orozco themselves. The guy with the scarred face from earlier reports to his boss how Reacher is tough as shit and needs backup if he ever runs into him. The trio heads to an airport as they try to drop Neagley's Range Rover and find a new car. But that's when Reacher spots Dixon, who had been working on an undercover case. Reacher asks Dixon to use her fake ID to rent them a car. Reacher reveals how Swan is most likely dead and that Sanchez and Orozco are MIA too. Even back in their military days, when the 110th was still active, Reacher and Dixon had a thing for each other. She was also the one who came up with the phrase, "In an investigation, details matter." The trio turns into a squad. Dixon takes a look at the numbers found in Franz's drive and notices how they're all fractions, with some pages having 26 numbers while the others have 27. She is not able to figure out what those numbers mean despite being good with them. The scarred man, who is revealed to be named Seropian, reports to his boss that Dixon rented a car under a fake name and that all four of them are headed to Atlantic City, probably to find their missing buddies. In Atlantic City, the gang finds Sanchez and Orozco's office in the same ransacked state as Franz's office in their hotel rooms. Reacher realizes he's the only one without his group photo. Among the mess, they also find a picture of Sanchez with a woman at a bar, likely his significant other. Hoping to find answers, they head to the bar in the photo Lucky Lounge. Upon arriving, Reacher tells Dixon and O'Donnell to stay behind while he and Neagley go inside to ask about the woman, whose name is Milena. Reacher tells the bartender that they're friends of Sanchez and asks if he's seen her. The bartender, assuming the worst, signals one of his men to take Reacher and Neagley to the back to meet Milena. But instead of leading them to her, he warns Milena to grab her things and leave, thinking the two are a threat. Dixon and O'Donnell spot Milena running and take off after her, while the men tasked with leading Reacher and Neagley to Milena suddenly turn on them. But the fight is over in no time, and Reacher and Neagley quickly take them down before Dixon captures their target. Back inside, the squad is treated to free drinks by the staff as Milena explains how another intimidating man, one with a scar on his cheek, had also come looking for her, asking if Sanchez had left behind any kind of digital storage device. Definitely Seropian. They ask if Franz or Swan had any contact with Sanchez and Orozco, and Milena confirms that Franz was in Atlantic City just a week ago and that the three of them had been working on a case together. She also recalls the last time she saw Sanchez, he was sitting on a stool in that very bar when he got a call. During the conversation, he repeated the numbers 650 at 100K each, and whatever it meant, it clearly worried him before he left. As the four of them sit in a casino, they try to decipher the meaning behind 650 at 100K each, wondering if it could point to a massive casino heist worth $65 million. However, O'Donnell points out how difficult it is to steal from a casino, considering how closely they monitor every penny coming in and out. Since Sanchez and Swan worked as freelance casino security guards, they might have stumbled upon something significant and reached out to Franz and Orozco for help. They head to the office of the head of security, David Wright, who immediately recognizes them from the stories Sanchez and Orozco used to tell. Reacher tells him that Sanchez and Orozco might be dead. Dixon hands over the list of numbers, hoping Wright might make sense of them, but he comes up empty. Even the phrase and the names don't ring any bells. Reacher then asks him to run a search on the AM names to see if any of them checked into a nearby hotel. As the squad prepares to leave, David offers them a free suite at the casino building, a gesture of goodwill since they were friends of Sanchez and Orozco. They all settle at the suite and catch up over some beers. It's nighttime when Reacher decides to treat himself to a banger meal while Dixon heads to the casino tables for some easy wins. A man in a suit approaches her, accusing her of counting cards, not illegal if done in your head. Instead of making a fuss, he hands her 2 tickets to a concert, hoping to persuade her to leave the table. Dixon declines the offer and instead tells him to pass the tickets to a man wearing a members-only jacket, who, as it turns out, is none other than Seropian himself. As the two of them exit the casino and go for a walk, chatting about random things, Dixon notices 2 men following them and a familiar-looking car parked up ahead. Reacher picks up on her cue and signals her. Without hesitation, they jump a fence and head into an industrial area, knowing they'll have to take their enemies down without guns since they're in a residential zone. Reacher lures one of them away and takes him out with a trowel, while Dixon uses a crowbar to handle the second. Just as she finishes, Seropian comes and fires a silenced shot, but she reacts fast, which allows Reacher to grab Seropian, bash the shit out of him, and shove his face into wet cement, drowning and killing him. Searching Seropian's pockets, they find keys to his car and check inside, uncovering documents filled with intel on the remaining 110th members along with a phone. Reacher dials the last called number, which connects to Langston, Seropian's boss. Reacher wastes no time provoking him, but Langston remains unfazed, warning Reacher that this won't end well for him. As the call ends, Dixon finds a parking pass for New Age Technologies, another piece of the puzzle. When it comes to disposing of the bodies, Reacher takes the simplest approach, dumping them all into the wet cement. Back at the suite, as Reacher disinfects his wounds, Dixon pulls up information on New Age, an aerospace company headquartered in New York. She then notices she has a wound of her own and gets Reacher to disinfect it for her. However, the scene changes from healing into a destroying scene, if you know what I mean. Meanwhile, the AM alias guy arrives at a meetup spot where another man hands him a map of 2 good ambush points and confirms that all 650 are in the truck, which is GPS tracked. AM assures him that the weapons will be used overseas and that the truck driver will remain unharmed. The next morning, Dixon and Reacher exchange details on their respective encounters from the previous night. Moments later, Wright shows up at their suite with more bad news. The Atlanta PD discovered Sanchez and Orozco's bodies near Catskill Mountain, close to where Franz was found. The wounds match his, meaning they were also thrown out of a helicopter. With every clue pointing toward New York, Dixon states the obvious, but Reacher, fueled by the deaths of his brothers in arms, makes one thing clear: they're going to need more guns. 10 days before the current events, Langston's men are torturing Franz for highly sensitive information, but Franz is a tough man. He spits in Langston's face, making it clear that he's not giving up anything. Infuriated, Langston smashes a crowbar into Franz's leg before ordering his men to prepare the helicopter. As Franz is about to be thrown out, he chuckles. Langston, confused, asks what's so funny. Franz replies that he's just wondering what the big guy is going to do to Langston. With that, Franz is tossed out the chopper. Langston, still unaware of the storm heading his way, has no idea he's about to face the wrath of a man the size of a grizzly bear. In the present, Reacher heads to an arms dealer, letting money do all the talking as he stocks up on guns and burner phones. As the squad drives back to New York, Neagley finds a new motel to lay low. But moments later, a cop car starts tailing them and turns on its sirens. Dixon pulls over and the officer tells them to wait inside the vehicle. A short while later, Russo arrives and arrests Reacher. Before getting taken away, Reacher instructs Dixon and Neagley to handle the parking pass lead while bringing O'Donnell along as his lawyer. As Russo takes them to the station, Dixon and Neagley visit New Age's office and meet Marlo Burns, the director of operations. Dixon makes it clear that this is a serious matter and asks for any information on the person the parking pass was issued to. At the station, Russo tells Reacher he has bad news, but Reacher cuts him off, mentioning that he already knows Sanchez and Orozco are dead. Russo, surprised, admits that all he wants is to get to the bottom of these murders. Reacher suggests they exchange information. Meanwhile, Marlo returns with the name on the parking pass, Trevor Seropian, who had been at New Age for an interview. Tensions rise between Reacher and Russo, but O'Donnell keeps them in check and they finally exchange intel. Reacher explains the phrase 650 at 100K each, while Russo reveals a new lead. Franz's office printer had a memory card with an unfinished print job due to low ink. The document was about Azari Mahmoud, an arms dealer known to Interpol for supplying terrorist organizations. Sanchez and Orozco had dug up intel on him for Franz, but O'Donnell realizes something. Azari Mahmoud is just one of the names from their list of AM aliases. Reacher writes them all down for Russo, who immediately flags them. While they wait for updates, the ladies talk about their relationships with Reacher, but Dixon has a realization. The numbers on the paper aren't random. They correspond to working days in a week, assuming a 6-day work week. Since there are 7 pages, each with 26 or 27 numbers, the list represents the last 7 months of the year. Russo finally returns with a hit on one of the aliases. Azari Mahmoud, now going by Alexander Markopoulos, just took a flight from Denver to JFK. Russo thinks they've got him, but AM is 2 steps ahead. As he arrives at the airport, he immediately spots the authorities waiting for him. Realizing his cover is blown, he calls Langston to report the delay. Langston is furious because every wasted minute risks them getting found out and time in the federal prison. On his way out, AM spots an ad for a cosmetic surgeon, Dr. El-Zogby, who looks very similar to him, giving him a devious idea. The squad regroups and Dixon and Neagley share their findings. They also track down Seropian's home address and, after a quick Google search, find his neighbor Barbara Gottesman, a woman in her late 70s, who confirms that Seropian does indeed live there. Before heading to the house, Reacher makes a stop at a hardware store to get a little crafty. At the house, Reacher slides a makeshift pipe bomb through the front door. The explosion confirms what they suspected. Marlo Burns set them up. Inside, a group of men is waiting to take them out, one of whom is already burning alive from the blast. Reacher and his team clear the house, eliminating every threat. Just as the fight ends, Reacher spots a white SUV outside, trying to get away. The man inside was sent to confirm if the 110th was dead or not. Reacher gives chase but quickly realizes he won't catch up on foot. So in the most Reacher way possible, he throws a goddamn barbecue grill at the windshield, making the driver crash. When Reacher gets to the wrecked vehicle, he finds the driver is Brian Collins, a New Age employee. But New Age made a massive mistake giving such a high-risk job to an old man. Brian dies from a heart attack before Reacher can get any information out of him. Back at the house, the squad confirms that the men they took down had nothing on them. Later, an enraged Russo storms into their motel, scolding them for their reckless behavior. Reacher tells him that Marlo Burns set them up. Russo, though frustrated, assures them that the cops won't be after them for now, but warns them to stop pulling this cowboy shit. He also reveals that AM never showed up at the airport, meaning all his aliases are now useless to him. Before parting ways, Reacher hands Russo his burner phone number. Not even an hour after Russo warns them against more reckless behavior, the gang does exactly that. They put on masks, pile into Brian's car, and Reacher rams the vehicle straight into the New Age office lobby, setting off alarms. With just 2 minutes to work, they grab as many files, hard drives, and laptops as they can, including a bottle of whiskey for good measure. Before leaving, Reacher spots an employee group photo on the wall and takes it with him. Later, as the squad examines the picture, they make a shocking discovery. Swan is in the photo. This throws everything into question. Was their friend working with the people trying to take down the 110th? Or is there another explanation? Either way, things just got a whole lot more complicated. At a restaurant, tensions run high as the team grows frustrated with their lack of new information from their break-in at New Age. O'Donnell voices his suspicion that Swan might be dirty, but Reacher refuses to believe it. Swan had been working as the assistant director of security at New Age under Shane Langston, the head of security. With more and more New Age employees tied to the case, Reacher decides their best move is to dig into the entire company, one employee at a time. Meanwhile, Russo gets chewed out for the 110th stunt at New Age's office. Neagley, however, uncovers an email from Swan to Marlowe referencing Jimi Hendrix's album titled Axis, Bold as Love, specifically the 6th track named Little Wing. O'Donnell points out that Swan despised Hendrix, which raises a red flag. Why would he pretend to like something he openly hated? Their hunch pays off. Reacher pulls up information on Little Wing, a massive federal defense project and the biggest undertaking in New Age's history. A test run was even conducted for military brass, including a Senator Malcolm Lavoie, the man who pushed for Little Wing's approval in Congress. O'Donnell, already familiar with Lavoie's bruised reputation, points out his history of shady dealings. Realizing they have a corrupt senator backing Little Wing, Dixon suggests their next step, meeting Lavoie. But that seems difficult considering how much security a senator has. Reacher, however, still refuses to believe Swan could be involved, even as the others remain skeptical. Flashback to their military days, back when the 110th busted a major drug operation and confiscated 48 bricks of heroin. Dixon notices one brick is missing. Lowry swears he loaded all 48 into Swan's car, but when they check they find the missing brick under the seat. It's the first time Swan ever raised any suspicion in a case. Elsewhere in Dr. Elzogby's office, AM doesn't waste time. He kills both the doctor and his secretary, steals the ID and walks out undetected. With a new identity in hand, AM can now travel freely. Back with the team, O'Donnell digs up intel on Lavoie's legislative director, Daniel Boyd, and discovers he'll be attending a fundraiser in Boston that night. Believing Boyd could be a key source of information on Little Wing, the team decides to set him up. Reacher finally returns Russo's call, but instead of spilling what they found at New Age, he simply tells Russo to run background checks on the employees himself before hanging up. Their next move is to head to Boston. Neagley and Dixon plan to visit Marlowe while Reacher and O'Donnell go get their hands on some drugs for the mission, of course. Dixon and Neagley arrive at Marlowe's house only to find she took her daughter and fled, leaving behind a stash of cash and valuables. Meanwhile, AM books a rental car under Elzogby's name, and the 110th rolls up to Boston, dripped out to the max. At the opera, Dixon spots Boyd and effortlessly seduces him into offering her a seat. Neagley keeps a close watch while Reacher and O'Donnell work on deciphering the numbers they found. Reacher cracks it. The fractions are tracking an event success rate: 2,197 attempts, 1,547 successes. 2,197 minus 1,547 equals 650. That leaves 650 failures. 650 at 100K each. The pieces are coming together. Moments later, Neagley signals that Dixon and Boyd have left the opera, setting the next phase of their plan in motion with an old friend coming into play. Outside, Dixon leads Boyd to her car where she pulls out some gear that Reacher and O'Donnell acquired earlier. She stays clean, but Boyd doesn't hesitate. Right on cue, Oscar Finley, our king from Margrave now in Boston, shows up and arrests Boyd for drug use. At the station, Reacher and O'Donnell pretend to be FBI agents, threatening to expose Boyd's drug use and his affair to his wife. Cracking under pressure, Boyd spills everything. Little Wing is an advanced anti-missile software initially designed to protect commercial aircraft. But then New Age stepped in, proposing to modify it to be used on missiles instead, essentially turning it into an advanced aim assist system for shoulder-fired weapons. The missile could appear to miss its target, then turn back around and hit dead-on. Boyd also reveals that New Age operates two facilities, software in New York, hardware in Denver. With everything they need, Reacher and O'Donnell leave. Outside the station, Reacher and Finley catch up. Reacher is surprised to learn that instead of retiring, Finley is now a lieutenant. Neagley joins them for a quick introduction, but there's no time to linger. The 110th has to keep moving. Reacher and O'Donnell plan to head to Homeland Security in D.C. to dig into AM, while Neagley and Dixon are told by Reacher to make their way to Denver. Reacher mentions that his brother Joe worked at Homeland and his connections might be of some help there. When asked how Joe's doing, Reacher reveals that Joe was murdered. Before hitting the road, the squad stops by a steakhouse, but they don't even make it inside before a biker gang rolls up, ready to take out the 110th. A brutal parking lot brawl breaks out, but the bikers quickly realize they made a huge mistake messing with Reacher. Once the dust settles, Reacher takes a phone from one of the bikers and dials Langston. Langston, now fully aware that Reacher is getting too close to the truth, tries to cut a deal, offering Reacher anything he wants in exchange that he stops pursuing Langston. Reacher tells Langston that the only thing he wants is to throw him out of a helicopter. Things are looking very lively at O'Donnell's house as he tells his wife Lily to get ready and leave with their 2 kids until the case is solved. Reacher is also there, since he's the one with connections at Homeland. O'Donnell then gets a message from Neagley and Dixon that they're at the New Age facility in Denver. Neagley and Dixon pretend to be reps from DCMA and ask for the delivery schedule for the missiles, only to find out they missed it by 10 minutes. All 650 of them. The man in charge hands them a manifest, and realizing they're too late, the two take off after the truck. The driver comes across a stopped truck, gets out to offer help, and is immediately shot down by AM's hijacker. The hijackers take over the truck, and AM receives a call confirming that the missiles are secured and will arrive in New York. Reacher and O'Donnell head to Homeland Security's office for a meeting with two DHS officers, Omar Karim and Hernandez, through Joe's connections. Omar mentions that AM has appeared on their radar a few times but was never caught due to the lack of information on him. He also reveals that AM deals in bearer bonds, commonly used by tax evaders and money launderers all over. Omar confirms that AM is the only delivery guy for his client's money. After sharing what they know, the DHS officers ask for information in return, but Reacher and O'Donnell say they're still working on their part and will be in touch when it's over. Neagley and Dixon catch up to the truck, but the hijackers have already swapped the containers and plates. Realizing the two women are investigators, the hijackers open fire, giving the truck driver a chance to escape. The women take out the remaining hijackers, and before calling the cops to handle the bodies in the now empty truck, Neagley grabs the manifest from Dixon's car and discovers something big. She calls Reacher and O'Donnell with two bombshells. The New Age truck carrying 650 missiles was just hijacked, and Tony Swan is still alive. Not only that, but he personally signed off on the shipment from New York. Reacher refuses to believe Swan is dirty, convinced New Age forged his signature. But Dixon points out that New Age has a comprehensive fingerprint and biometric scanning system, making it nearly impossible to force someone to sign off on anything. O'Donnell then asks Reacher that when he said he'd kill everyone responsible for the deaths of our friends, does that include Swan too? Reacher refuses to think Swan is guilty because back in their 110th days while busting a heroin ring, Swan saved Reacher's life by taking 2 bullets for him. No way someone who didn't care about his friends would do something like that. Reacher then goes out for a walk to clear his mind. While on his walk though, Lavoie's agents, Seaver and Hart, pull up and tell him the senator has a proposal. Reacher gets in the car, and for some reason their meeting spot is behind the primate exhibit at the DC Zoo. Lavoie tells Reacher he knows about what he did in Margrave, burning down a massive counterfeiting operation, both figuratively and literally. Lavoie's proposal is that he wants Reacher to do the same thing to Little Wing, burn it all down to the ground. Lavoie is trying to avoid criminal charges since he helped push its approval, and of course wants to line his pockets with more cash. He offers Reacher all the resources he needs to take down New Age and Little Wing while making sure no one ever finds out the 110th was involved. Moments later, after Lavoie and his agents leave, Reacher gets a call from O'Donnell, mentioning that Franz's body has been released, and the funeral is tomorrow in New York. The next day, the remaining members of the 110th head to the funeral. Reacher and O'Donnell notice Russo handing a toy to Mikey and talking to Angela, reassuring her that he's got her back. Suspicious, Reacher asks Russo why a biker gang jumped the 110th in Boston outside the steakhouse when Russo was the only one who knew they'd be there. Russo fires back, saying that while Reacher was in Boston pulling God knows what bullshit, he was running background checks on New Age's top brass, including Langston. Turns out every single one of them is a corrupt ex-cop except Swan, who is an ex-military man and still under suspicion. The two step away and the funeral begins. As the firing squad prepares for the 21-gun salute, Reacher spots 2 snipers across the road and alerts everyone. Russo takes Angela and Mikey to safety while the 110th closes in to take the shooters out. Neagley kills 1 sniper and Reacher chases the other on foot, but with great weight comes a great decrease in sprinting speed. The shooter makes it to his car, but Russo comes in clutch, picking up Reacher, turning it into a classic car chase. As they pursue the shooter, Reacher starts to think Russo is clean, but someone in his ranks is leaking information. The chase ends with the shooter crashing his car. Russo and Reacher interrogate him, and he drops a bombshell. He doesn't even know who Langston is. Instead, it was Swan who hired him. The shooter also reveals he was supposed to meet Swan at an abandoned building in Queens to collect his payment. Later that night, the 110th and Russo set up a sting, sending the shooter inside the building to gather intel: how many men, the layout, weapons, everything. But as soon as he steps inside, the entire building explodes, raising even more suspicion about their old friend. After the explosion, the 110th members don't understand why Reacher still believes Swan is clean. Russo arrives and confirms that Swan wasn't inside the building and the only body found was the shooter's. Russo then gets a message with the address where Marlowe left her car. The squad plans to head there immediately to find the woman who set them up, but Russo stays behind, saying he has someone to talk to. The squad finds the car empty and heads into a nearby convenience store where they check the CCTV footage. They see Marlowe and her daughter Jane inside. Jane had been playing on her Nintendo Switch, leading Neagley to come up with an idea. Head back to Marlowe's house, find Jane's gamertag and use it to get their IP address and location. Back at Marlowe's house, they wait for Jane to start playing a game so they can trace her IP address. In the meantime, Neagley logs into her account. O'Donnell makes frozen pizza and Reacher heads upstairs to sleep. Dixon, however, can't let a man sleep. Meanwhile, Russo goes to visit Drew Marsh, an NYPD lieutenant and his former supervisor. Russo corners Marsh, demanding to know why the 110th was ambushed by bikers in Boston when only he and Marsh knew they'd be there. Marsh confesses that Langston paid him an insane amount of money to keep tabs on Russo and inform him if he got too close to the truth. He insists he only did it to save his own skin, but Russo is absolutely furious because he hates corrupt cops, and Marsh is doing exactly the things that throw him in the same category as those assholes. Marsh tells Russo that there was no way he wanted to end up the same way as Russo's dad, 6 feet underground, and the only way was to listen to what Langston had to say. Russo loses respect for Marsh for being a sellout and leaves with anger. At least he was able to get a confession out of Marsh that he was the one who told Langston that Reacher was in Boston. Neagley later informs Reacher that she found Jane's IP address and Marlowe's location, which is an hour away. Marlowe had taken Jane to Chad's house, a friend of hers. When Chad's sprinklers suddenly go off, he steps outside to check, only to be caught by Reacher and the squad. Reacher, using a silencer made from a plastic bottle, threatens Chad into calling Marlowe into the garage, but the gang laughs as Chad falls for such a shitty threat. This is where the pieces start falling into place. Marlowe had no idea the address she gave Neagley and Dixon was fake, and it was Langston who forced her to provide it once he learned the 110th was onto him. She also reveals that Swan is clean and has been trying to shut down Langston's Operation Little Wing. One day, Swan mysteriously disappeared and Langston forced Marlowe to cover up whatever he had been investigating, threatening her and bribing her with money. What Swan discovered was that the chips containing Little Wing's missile guidance software were being flagged as defective at a much higher rate than expected. In reality, 650 of these chips were being falsely marked as defective so they could be sold to terrorists at an astronomical price. Marlowe doesn't know the engineer responsible, but knows he must demonstrate the chip installation process before the deal is finalized. Reacher doesn't hesitate and plans to go straight to Langston and get the engineer's name. At the same time, Langston speaks with the engineer Russell Johnson, who assures him he'll walk the client through every step of the chip installation. Suddenly, Langston receives a call from Marlowe, who pretends to be terrified. She lies, saying she's being chased by the 2 women who broke into his house and their friends. Langston takes the bait and asks where she is, immediately leaving with his men to ensure her and her daughter's safety. The 110th heads to Russo's place, asking him to take care of Jane while they use Marlowe as bait. Russo then reveals that Marsh confessed to being on Langston's payroll and was the one who leaked Reacher's location to the bikers in Boston. Agreeing to protect Jane, Russo decides to leave town for a few days to Staten Island to ensure their safety. The meeting spot is an abandoned parking lot. Marlowe stands in the middle while the 110th hides, ready to take Langston down. As Russo leaves his driveway, he notices a car tailing him. He floors it, prompting the men inside to open fire. Russo calls Reacher for help and Marlowe hears it, ruining the plan. Langston realizes he's been set up. A gunfight breaks out between the 110th and Langston's men inside the abandoned parking lot. Neagley picks up the team, but Reacher tells her to go help Russo while he handles Langston and his men alone. He traps Langston and his men in the parking lot by deflating their car's tire. Reacher lures Langston's men into a bus one by one, taking them out. The way he finishes off the last guy is peak Reacher. Meanwhile, Russo's still being chased and ends up boxed in with no way out. He steps out of his car, letting his gun do the talking. Inside the parking lot, Reacher calls Langston using a phone he took from one of his men, which starts ringing Langston's phone, pinpointing his location. Before he can reach Langston, a helicopter arrives to save his ass. A gunman aboard the chopper lays down suppressive fire, forcing Reacher to take cover, allowing Langston to escape. Russo tells Jane to run and not look back, putting himself in a do-or-die situation. He leaves cover and takes out his attackers, but gets shot at his vitals in the process. However, Jane gets away, but when the gunfire stops, she looks back to find Russo is on the ground. She turns forward again and sees one last gunman approaching her. Before he can act, Neagley mows him down with a car. The 110th reunites mother and daughter. Neagley rushes to Russo, who weakly asks about Jane. She assures him Jane is safe. As life fades from Russo's eyes, he reaches out his bloodied hand. Neagley, who hates physical contact with anyone, takes his hand and rests his head on her lap, waiting for an ambulance. But it's already too late. The 110th needs a safe place for Marlowe and Jane to stay, but everyone Reacher knows is already involved in this case, even Finley up in Boston. Dixon mentions that after the 110th was disbanded, she worked in-house for a debt collection company in Buffalo, where she rented an apartment from a landlord named Bob Lee, a retired firefighter she trusts with her life. That makes Bob the perfect candidate to take the mother and daughter in. O'Donnell and Dixon are in charge of making sure the two get off safely while Reacher and Neagley visit Marsh to talk about stuff. Reacher and Neagley head to Marsh's home, but Neagley, pissed about Russo's death, stays in the car in case anything goes wrong. Reacher heads inside and gives Marsh 2 options: either die at Reacher's hands or turn himself in. Marsh, being the senile dumbass he is, tries to reach for his gun, but Reacher kicks his desk into him, pinning him against the wall. Reacher asked Marsh about Little Wing and AM, but Langston kept Marsh in the dark on those things. The pain gets to Marsh, and he speaks out that Grant, the guy they ran over last night, would know what Reacher wants to know. Grant, who was thought to be dead, is actually alive and under intensive care at Mount Sinai. Reacher gets the info he wanted, but Marsh tries once more to grab his gun, only to get shot in the head by Reacher. The duo heads to their next location, Mount Sinai. At Jade East Motel, O'Donnell and Dixon make sure Marlowe and Jane are safely on their way to Buffalo. Once they set off, Dixon tells O'Donnell that he's the only one of the 4 with a family, and the stakes are high, so if he wants to walk away from this, now's the time. But who is she kidding? O'Donnell is prepared to see this to the end. How and why was the 110th disbanded? Let's find out. Hortense Fields, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, ordered Reacher to shut Operation Kite Runner down, but Reacher was having none of it. Operation Kite Runner was the 110th's longest-running case, over 2 years of hard work trying to bust a massive drug ring in America with some of the military involved in it as well. Fields ordered Reacher to stop investigating the case because it would leave a bad mark on the CO's name, but Reacher didn't care about that. Things got heated between the two, but in the end Reacher conceded. Or did he? Later, Reacher decided he still wanted to take down this drug ring and bring justice, despite the consequences of defying orders. He gathered the members of the 110th. With training holidays coming up, a heroin sale would be taking place on abandoned military-owned land, 5 clicks north of their base. He gave them 2 options. They could walk away with their chins held high, or they could see this through and fulfill their duty as soldiers. Everyone knew that defying orders would either get them fired or destroy their careers in a way that made them wish they had been fired. Despite knowing all of this, not a single member of the 110th walked away. They got to work ASAP. That night, the 110th Special Investigations Unit headed to the abandoned base and spotted 3 soldiers, Hughes, Sy, and Molnar, waiting for someone. They surrounded them and investigated the vehicles, searching for hidden heroin. As the unit grew frustrated, Reacher noticed a patch on the spare tire behind one of the vehicles. He cut it open with O'Donnell's switchblade to find what he was looking for: heroin. They found similar patches on every spare tire. Just as they arrested the 3 soldiers, their buyers showed up in 3 vans, engaging in a shootout with the 110th. The 110th arrested Hughes and took down the ring, bringing Operation Kite Runner to an end, along with their careers as soldiers. While packing their things at the office, Swan whipped out his guitar and the entire unit started jamming. Then a very pissed-off Fields stormed in and ruined the fun, announcing that the 110th Special Investigations Unit was officially disbanded, effective immediately. But that unit never cared about anything except doing the right thing, just like Reacher taught them. Back in the present, disguised as nurses, Reacher and Neagley head into Mount Sinai where Grant is. They enter his room and use a very unique interrogation method to get Grant to talk. Of course, we're talking about torture here. Grant reveals that Langston is meeting the buyer tomorrow at 5 a.m., claiming he doesn't know anything else. Reacher points out that the CCTV footage might cause problems for him and Neagley since they'll be seen entering the room. But if they make it look like Grant had an embolism, especially after a car crash, no one will suspect a thing. Reacher kills Grant, avenging Russo, and the duo heads out of the room. As they make their way out, they spot a suspicious-looking doctor who turns out to be someone Langston hired to kill Grant. Langston doesn't like loose ends. Neagley and Reacher chase the fake doctor but lose him and split up. With Reacher's help, Neagley takes him down. They find a burner phone on him, which Reacher uses to call Langston. Reacher tells Langston he's down another man, but Langston fires back, saying that he's got 2 of Reacher's own pals, O'Donnell and Dixon, at his R&D facility in Rockland. Reacher lies, saying Langston's assassin killed Neagley and that he's the only one left. Langston demands Reacher surrender his weapon and stay under his men's watch until the transaction is done, at which point he and his pals will be set free. The 2 of them agree to meet later that night. Reacher makes a call to Lavoie asking if he's still prepared to provide the help needed to tear down Little Wing. Lavoie agrees to send 2 SEALs and 1 Ranger to aid him, but that's not the only thing Reacher asks for. Outside the New Age R&D facility, Reacher checks the list of employees and takes a pin from it. He knows what Langston will do to him once he's inside, but there's no way he's just gonna sit there and take it. Neagley sees how tight security is, but then a trio of drunk kids shows up outside, blasting music, mocking the guards, and throwing a can of beer at the fence, showing Neagley that the fence is electrified. Reacher gets an idea from all this. Meanwhile, AM meets up with the truck hijacker and confirms that the missiles are the real deal. Inside the R&D facility, Langston's men torture O'Donnell and Dixon just like they did with Franz. While sitting in the car with Neagley, Reacher prepares to leave, but Neagley stops him. She tells him she's been thinking about Operation Kite Runner, how they knew it was a losing proposition but did it anyway. She says she thinks they might die, but Reacher just tells her he's got his best soldier covering his ass, so he's got nothing to worry about. With all the planning and preparation done, it's finally time to execute. Reacher leaves the car and heads to the main gate of the facility, where his weapon is taken away. Langston shows up and his men bring out O'Donnell and Dixon on gurneys, proving they're still alive. God have mercy on Langston because Reacher sure as hell won't. Reacher, cuffed, is escorted inside the facility. Langston plans to throw all 3 of them from his chopper, but Reacher refuses to get on the gurney and starts kicking ass, even with his hands tied. Langston gets word that Neagley's body was nowhere to be found and demands that Reacher tell him her location, but he doesn't say a word. She's Langston's last loose end. Outside, Neagley takes out 2 guards and asks Lavoie's men when they'll be landing. Inside, Reacher is getting punched as Langston tries to get information out of him. Langston mentions how he offered Swan a deal, but Swan was too stubborn for his own good and tried to take down Langston's entire operation. When Reacher asks where Swan is, Langston heads to a drawer and pulls out a preservative jar with Swan's identifiers inside. Langston reveals that all he needed were Swan's fingerprints and iris to make it seem like Swan was the one signing off on all those documents, even leaving his own dog behind. Reacher is finally proven right. The only reason Swan would leave his dog was if he couldn't come home. He didn't recruit some pathetic traitor into the 110th. Tony Swan was clean. Langston tells his men to load O'Donnell and Dixon onto the chopper and then come back for Reacher. Neagley spots Lavoie's men landing at the facility, but she also sees O'Donnell and Dixon being loaded onto the chopper. Reacher takes the pin he grabbed from the file earlier and unlocks his cuffs. As Langston and his men try to destroy all evidence, they hear loud music blasting from outside. Neagley, posing as one of the drunk kids from before, cranks up the volume from her car while Lavoie's men cut the power to the building, forcing it into backup mode. Just as a guard steps outside to tell her to turn the music off, Neagley shoots him. At the same time, Lavoie's men storm the main entrance, taking out Langston's men. Neagley heads inside and provides cover as Reacher frees himself from the cuffs. He spots Langston making a run for the helicopter and asks Neagley to cover him. Reacher barely makes it, clinging onto the wheels as the chopper lifts off. Over the Catskill Mountains, Langston orders Parker to open the back doors and decides to throw Dixon out first. But that allows Reacher to climb in and be a pain in Langston's ass one last time. Reacher gets stabbed in the arm with a switchblade, and the gunfire inside the chopper makes the pilot lose control. The sudden tilt sends Dixon's gurney sliding toward the open door, but Reacher grabs her just in time. As Dixon dangles from the edge, she manages to free herself from the gurney and rips the blade from Reacher's arm, using it to take out Parker, leaving Langston as the last enemy standing. Dixon forces the pilot to keep the helicopter steady. And now comes the satisfying part. Reacher grabs Langston by the leg and drags him toward the open door. Langston begs for mercy, saying he'll tell Reacher where he's meeting the buyer, but Reacher tells him that he assumes that's information he needs, but in an investigation, assumptions kill. Langston gets what he deserves for messing with the special investigators, falling to his death, just like what he did to Franz, Sanchez, and Orozco. The pilot tells them the buyer is meeting the engineer responsible for guiding him on how to install the missile chips. As AM and the truck hijacker arrive at the engineer's house, Neagley takes out the hijacker, and Reacher greets AM with a gun pointed at him. AM tries to play dumb. When Reacher asks who he's selling the weapons to, he smugly refuses, saying revealing such a thing would ruin his reputation and business, completely unaware of the gravity of his situation. As AM keeps running his mouth, Reacher and the gang gun him down, filling him with holes. Neagley grabs the missile with the little wing chip, and they head to the barn where the pilot and engineer are tied up. Reacher decides to let them go and they board the chopper. But they still haven't tested Little Wing, have they? Neagley aims, waiting for the chopper to fly over the river. And just like the documents said, Little Wing works exactly as described, shooting the helicopter down from above. But just as the dust settles, Lavoie's men turn their rifles on Reacher and the 110th, telling them that the senator doesn't want to risk any leaks. What they don't know is that Reacher is one step ahead and that he already called Omar Karim. Omar and his men arrive at the barn, arresting Lavoie and his crew and taking care of everything else for Reacher. The 110th walks away with another job well done, and $65 million in the bag. The squad heads to a diner, ordering food and discussing what to do with the money. Dixon suggests using it to help those affected by this whole mess. And that's exactly what Reacher, now in charge of the money, does. He sends insane amounts to Angela, Russo's brother, Milena, and Orozco's sister. He also makes a massive donation to an animal shelter in Swan and his dog Maisie's name. Reacher sets aside plenty for Neagley, her dad, O'Donnell's kids, and Dixon. As they raise their bottles to absent friends, their last night together nears its end, but they try to hold on to the moment, taking one last group photo. The next morning, Dixon returns to the motel, waking Reacher up with a gift, a toothbrush, something he was so damn serious about getting. She tells him she needs to head to the airport, sharing a ride with O'Donnell. But before they part ways, who knows for how long, they manage to squeeze in one last kiss. After O'Donnell and Dixon leave, it's time for Reacher and Neagley to say goodbye too. Dixon insists Reacher get himself something with the money, so he buys a Trailways pass, unlimited bus travel in America for a year. Neagley, never one for goodbyes, tells him she hates how they go so long without contact, only speaking when it's a deadly mission. She tells him to get better at staying in touch. Before she walks away, she reminds him that he always calls the 110th his soldiers or his friends, but they both know they're more than that. Finally, Reacher boards the bus. An old man sitting nearby asks what he was doing in New York. Reacher tells the old man that he is visiting family. When asked where he's headed, Reacher says that he has no idea. Next stop, Abbotsford, Maine. Our big friend pulls up at a record store to sell some old vinyl and make a quick buck, but just as he looks outside, a rusty-ass Toyota pickup T-bones a black Audi carrying a university student named Richard Beck and his guard, John Cooper. The man in the pickup turns out to be a kidnapper. He takes Richard and, to cover his tracks, sets off a grenade in the Audi. Reacher rushes out to help, but the kidnapper opens fire with an Uzi, completely outgunning his shitty little revolver. Reacher manages to shoot the guy and tells Richard he's there to save him, only to turn around and in the heat of the moment shoot a cop dead without even realizing what he's done. Panicked, he throws Richard into his van and gets the hell out of there. But now the campus police are hot on their tail. Reacher eventually shakes off the pursuit and finds a safe spot, but he needs a new ride to get out of town. He finds a car parked out back, breaks in, and hotwires it. But Richard begs him not to leave him behind, offering an alternative to take him home, where his rich and well-connected father, a rug merchant of all things, can help Reacher disappear. Seeing this as his best shot at keeping low, Reacher agrees. At the security booth, they're greeted by ex-military Paul Van Hoven, aka Polly, a man who somehow makes Reacher look small. That never happens. Polly takes Reacher's empty revolver and lets them in. Inside, the head of security, Chapman Duke, tells Reacher to go meet Zachary Beck, Richard's father. In Beck's office, they discuss the morning's events, and Reacher makes it clear that all he needs is a place to lay low until he can scrape up enough money for a fake ID and a clean slate. Before leaving, he intentionally leaves his fingerprints on a glass, making it easy for Beck and his men to run a background check on him. Minutes later, Beck calls Reacher back, this time to a carriage house where Polly and Duke are waiting. Beck makes it clear that Reacher has two options: work for him or get turned in. Beck needs more muscle since his operation is under attack, but before Reacher can join the team, he has to prove he can follow orders by playing Russian roulette. With no choice, Reacher goes through with it, but he keeps spinning the barrel over and over, pulling the trigger until Beck himself stops him. Reacher earns himself a job. As he's leaving, he notices something buried under the soil inside the carriage house. Duke escorts him to his room, where Reacher is locked in until further notice. Once alone, he tears the place apart, looking for hidden cameras or mics, but finds nothing. Then, from the sole of his shoe, he pulls out a burner phone and dials Susan Duffy, letting her know that he's in. Flashback to several days earlier. Reacher spots an amateur purse snatcher eyeing a woman's bag. He stops the kid, gives him a warning and a $100 bill, and sends him on his way. Then, out of nowhere, he spots Francis Xavier Quinn, a man he has serious history with. But before he can get to him, Quinn vanishes in a car with his driver. Reacher borrows a phone and calls the new 110th Special Investigations Unit, reaching Officer Powell. He asks Powell to run the car's plates, but nothing comes up. Frustrated, Reacher gives Powell his motel address for any updates. Later that night, while Reacher is chilling in his room, federal agents show up at his door. He slips out through the back window, toothbrush in hand, but Duffy intercepts him. Moments later, two other agents, Elliot and Villanueva, also catch up. Reacher, uninterested in whatever business they have with him, turns to leave, until Duffy drops a bombshell that she knows all about his call with Powell, who sold him out. Duffy lays it all out. They're investigating a rug importing business called Bizarre Bazaar, which they suspect is a front for a massive drug operation. A high-level LA drug dealer, Darian Prado, recently flew in to meet the owner, Zachary Beck, a man they've been unable to identify. Duffy and her team think Reacher is looking for the same man, but he refuses to help unless she does something for him first. He tasks her with looking into hospital records near Linton, Virginia, around March 13th, searching for an Asian-American man in his 40s with a small-caliber bullet wound to the face who fell from a height and drowned. Sometime later, Duffy calls Reacher to a diner with news. She found a match. The man survived but had no memory of what happened. He was discovered washed up on a shore. Duffy lays out everything she's uncovered and demands information in return. Reacher reveals that the man she found is none other than Lieutenant Colonel Xavier Quinn from the military intelligence, formerly charged with selling military secrets to hostile nations. With this new information, Duffy pieces things together. If Beck and Quinn are working together, if that's the case, maybe she and Reacher should be too. Duffy admits she screwed up during Prado's surveillance, making the arrest impossible because of a bad warrant. With no intel on Beck and no way to get Prado, she turned to an old CI, Teresa Daniel, someone she busted and then flipped. Teresa was tricked by her boyfriend to transport some drugs in his car but was caught by Duffy. Duffy asked Teresa to infiltrate Bizarre Bazaar's warehouse to keep tabs on Beck, but a week ago she went dark. Duffy fears the worst, but Reacher tells her that if Teresa fell into Quinn's hands, she's already dead. That's how ruthless Quinn is. All the more reason for them to team up and take down Beck, Prado, and Quinn, while trying to save Teresa if she's still alive. With a handshake, Reacher and Duffy seal the deal. They devise a plan to stage Richard's kidnapping, allowing Reacher to infiltrate Beck's operation from the inside while gaining Beck's trust. Everything, the crash, the gunfight, even the cop Reacher shot, was pre-planned. Elliot played the kidnapper, Villanueva was the cop, and Reacher had marked his revolver's barrel to know exactly when the blanks would fire. The stolen cars, the hot wiring, it was all part of the act to make it look real. Even the hidden phone in his boot was courtesy of Duffy. Back in the present, Reacher asks Duffy about Richard's bodyguard, John Cooper, but she tells him he's keeping silent. Meanwhile, Reacher recalls seeing Duke take a plate of food outside, probably to a cellar beneath the carriage house where Teresa might be held. At 3 a.m., Reacher sneaks out of his room. His hunch is right. The hidden cellar he noticed earlier is real. He pries it open, heads inside, and finds a plate of food along with an earring that Duffy showed him earlier belonging to Teresa. The clues inside the cellar point towards the fact that Teresa was kept there and was moved out of the property just recently. Duffy assumes that they could be taking Teresa elsewhere to kill her, but Reacher assures Duffy by telling her that they kept Teresa in livable conditions inside the cellar with the food, a bed, blanket, and space heater. Reacher tries to go back to his room before he's found but sees a car pulling up to the house with Duke going up to the car and talking to the man inside. Back at the lodge, Duffy storms into the room in a fit of rage and starts aggressively interrogating Cooper about Teresa, but he still says that he's nothing more than a bodyguard. Cooper calls Duffy a bitch, and Villanueva threatens Cooper that if he does that again, he'll lock him up in a room with Duffy for an hour. Put me in the same room as Duffy and I'd be resisting release. Villanueva takes Duffy outside and tries to calm her down, but Duffy tells him to walk away while he still can because this case is getting messier by the second, but that old fart doesn't back out. Reacher in the meantime spots Duke going inside the house, possibly into his room. so Reacher runs back to his room, trying to make it inside before Duke does. He just barely manages to get inside before Duke, who says he has a job for him. Duke mentions that they found the pickup that the kidnappers used at some state evidence lot, so Reacher needs to go to the lot with Angel Dole to ID the truck to see who tried to kidnap Richard. As soon as Duke leaves, Reacher heads into the bathroom and calls Duffy, informing her that the bodyguard's Audi will be in the lot as well, and if they see the interior in pristine condition after they were made to believe that a real grenade went off inside the car, the whole kidnapping story falls apart. Duffy panics a little but informs Reacher that she'll get the car off the lot before he arrives there. On their way to the lot, Reacher learns that Angel is the type of guy who only cares about being bumped up in ranks and that Beck is not the real boss of this operation. Duffy and Villanueva make it to the lot, but only Duffy heads inside. She finds that the Audi is parked behind a wrecked car and that it's impossible to move them. She updates Villy on the situation while Reacher tries his absolute best to stall Angel, asking for a piss break and then getting a large coffee right after. Reacher and Angel make it to the lot and inside where Angel finds the pickup truck. Reacher tries to get him to head back home, but Angel spots the Audi as well. He finds it very odd how clean the interior is, but Reacher notices the plate on the car is from Delaware, and not a Maine one. This manages to fool Angel and the two of them head back home thanks to Duffy, who swapped the plate of the car while also hiding under that very same car. Reacher heads back inside his room and only manages a blink of shut eye before Beck comes in and assigns him his second job, truck driving. After around with Polly, Reacher gets to the truck where Duke briefs him on the job. Reacher is expected to drive this truck to Connecticut within 6 hours without opening the back. He agrees to the job and calls Duffy to let her know of the situation and tells her that he needs to meet up with her at a rest stop so they can see what Beck has Reacher transporting. While driving, Reacher calls Neagley, our queen, asking her to run background checks on Polly, Duke, and Angel. Neagley asks Reacher what kind of case he's working on, but Reacher doesn't share anything and tells her that he can't afford anyone getting involved in this. Reacher finally makes it to the rest stop where he meets up with Duffy, Villanueva, and Dick Grunert, who trains drug-sniffing dogs in New Haven PD, but his dog doesn't find any drugs or bodies inside the truck, leaving the trio a bit disappointed. Reacher works on soldering the lock while Villanueva takes the GPS to the next rest stop to avoid raising suspicion in case Reacher was being tracked. Duffy gets in the truck with Reacher where he reveals to her that Beck isn't the real boss and there's a possibility that Quinn is the mastermind here. Reacher finishes the job where he's told to exchange trucks and take an empty one back to the warehouse, which he does. Reacher walks inside the warehouse where he only finds Angel and no one else. Angel was tracking down Reacher's location on maps and calls him over, mentioning that he has something to talk about before Duke comes over to pick him up. Angel tells Reacher that he was searching the minivan that he hot-wired and didn't find any scratches on the steering column, and the car mats didn't have any pieces of insulation from stripping the wires, but Reacher lies, saying that he tosses the pieces out, which Angel finds both odd and hilarious. Reacher realizes that Angel is onto his ass and he needs to get out of here ASAP, but that's when Duke comes over to pick Reacher up, and as soon as Reacher is about to leave, Angel just goes ahead and says that he thinks Reacher is dirty and is working with the cops. Before Angel can get to Duke, Reacher slams Angel's head onto a pin, killing him instantly. He then stashes his body under a desk, not a very good job of cleaning up. Duke gets tired of honking and decides to get out of the car, but Reacher comes out in the nick of time, telling Duke that he was late because Angel talks too much. On the way back home, Duke asks Reacher what Angel was rambling about, but Reacher brushes it off as nothing important. Once inside the kitchen, Reacher makes some small talk with Annette, the maid, and learns that she was born in Le Havre. She only works for Beck to pay for college here in Maine. Moments later, Duke returns and tells Reacher that Beck has some questions about Angel's voicemail. In Beck's office, the conversation turns serious. Angel ID'd the pickup truck, which belonged to some people Beck's crew had previously done business with. But according to Beck, those guys didn't have anyone matching the kidnapper Reacher described. Reacher suggests that maybe they're expanding their operation and trying to send a message by going after Richard. Beck doesn't buy it. If these guys wanted to make a move, why are they lying low now? Reacher argues that they're keeping quiet for a reason and will resurface soon. He tries using this angle to pry more information out of Beck, but comes up empty. Reacher calls Neagley, who gives him a rundown on the men he asked about. Polly and Angel were ex-military, both discharged for violent misconduct and harassment, while Duke was a former cop with a criminal record. Neagley offers to help, but the moment she realizes Quinn is involved, Reacher shuts her down. This isn't her fight, and he won't let her get dragged into it because Quinn is not a predictable man. Without another word, he ends the call. Reacher calls Duffy, asking her to drop off a car and a change of clothes a mile away from the house. He needs to get into the warehouse and clean up the mess he made. A few hours later, he sneaks out, strips down to his underwear, and swims across the 7 seas before finally reaching Duffy. Inside the car, Reacher fills her in on Beck, how they need to convince him that the kidnappers are no longer a threat, and how Quinn might be playing a bigger role in all this than they initially thought. As always, Duffy is worried sick about Teresa and insists on searching for her in the warehouse. Reacher doesn't say much, but in a rare moment he briefly mentions that it was his subordinate Dominique Cole who was killed by Quinn. The two head to the warehouse where they find Angel's body and his laptop. the latter of which Duffy takes with her. Before dealing with the body, they decide to search every box, container, and crate for any sign of Teresa. They tear through everything, leaving no stone unturned, but she's nowhere to be found. That's when Reacher gets an idea. If they can't find Teresa, they might as well use the time they have to dispose of Angel's body. He stuffs the body inside one of the containers, and they get to scrubbing, cleaning up every trace of the mess Reacher made. As they're scrubbing the blood, the guys who swap trucks with Reacher suddenly show up at the warehouse, bringing the truck back. Reacher and Duffy ambush them, taking them down hand to hand without using guns to avoid suspicion. Once the fight's over, they get back to work cleaning up the scene and disposing of the new bodies along with Angel's. When the job's done, Duffy drives Reacher back to the drop-off point. He grabs Angel's gun, seals it in a bag, and swims back the same way he came. Next morning, Beck is worried about a big shipment that's coming in. It's all hands on deck except for the two guys that were supposed to take it in. Yeah, about that. Reacher isn't asked to do any of the important stuff, rather Beck asks him to take Richard to town for some shopping. While driving Richard to town, Reacher manages to squeeze out one key detail. Beck's real boss is Julius McCabe. But beyond that, Richard keeps his mouth shut, refusing to reveal anything else about their operations. They stop by a toy shop where Richard picks out a Roy Rogers cap gun as a birthday gift for his dad, who's turning 50. The party's going to be a big one, with plenty of guests. While Richard browses, Reacher slips into the restroom and calls Duffy. He fills her in on the situation that there's a big shipment coming in, but he's hitting a wall when it comes to new intel. All the real secrets stay locked within the upper ranks, which means Reacher needs to climb the ladder and become Beck's new number 2. He also asks Duffy to send an email from Angel's account, feeding Beck false intel about an unused DEA safe house in the woods being the last known location of the kidnappers. With that, Duffy and Villanueva set out to track the shipment. Back in town, Richard gets bullied by some guys from his university, but Reacher steps in, making them regret it instantly. Afterward, Richard, feeling more at ease, buys Reacher some ice cream and finally starts opening up. He admits that McCabe isn't just involved, he's the one pulling the strings. McCabe took over Beck's business and now controls every part of their lives, even assigning Cooper to shadow Richard wherever he goes. Turns out the first kidnapping wasn't some random attack, it was carried out by Polly under McCabe's orders. Beck had found a way to bypass customs and dock managers, which McCabe later discovered. Wanting in on that privilege, McCabe decided to exploit Beck's rug business as a cover to smuggle his goods. This revelation deepens the trust between Richard and Reacher. Near the warehouse, Duffy and Villanueva take plenty of photos of the shipment being prepped. Something's off. This new shipment is twice the size of the previous ones, with even fewer details available. They also managed to snap photos of a man who looks important, probably thinking it's McCabe, but who's gonna tell her? Back at the lodge, Elliot steps away to take a call from Duffy. Seizing the moment, Cooper, ever the manipulator, injures himself with his chair, trying to gain Elliot's sympathy and possibly earn a way out. But Elliot doesn't fall for it. Meanwhile, Reacher and Richard return home just as Duke and Beck gear up to take out the supposed kidnappers after receiving the fake email from Angel. Unbeknownst to them, they're walking right into Reacher and Duffy's trap. Before heading out, Reacher takes a quick piss break but sneaks to the back of the house to retrieve Angel's gun from the trash bag. With that in hand, he joins the others in the car and they set off for the woods. At the DEA safe house, Reacher and Duke grab their weapons from the trunk and prepare to move in. Reacher lies, claiming he sees 6 men inside and they plan to ambush them. But the moment they step in, Reacher turns his gun on Duke, demanding to know where Teresa is being kept. Duke, being a complete dumbass, refuses to say anything. Reacher doesn't waste time and he kills him on the spot. Now he needs to sell the story. He grabs Duke's rifle, stages a shootout, and rigs the house by cutting the oven's gas line. He tosses some flammable cans inside the microwave and sets a timer, creating a makeshift bomb. Before leaving, he roughs himself up a bit to make it look like he barely escaped. As he runs out, the house explodes behind him. He spins a convincing lie to Beck, claiming the attack failed but confirming Duke is dead. To make it even more believable, he hands over Angel's gun, reinforcing the idea that Angel was a traitor who had been bought off. With the 2 truck guys missing as well, Beck buys into it completely. Reacher's plan works. Beck now fully trusts him, and just like that, Reacher is promoted to his new number 2. After a couple of minutes, Beck calls McCabe and briefs him on Angel's betrayal and Duke's death. Beck then tells Reacher that the call was from his boss and that he has appointed him as Beck's new lieutenant. Reacher then drops Beck and goes to get some lunch, but actually he just pulls up to the lodge where Duffy and the gang are staying at. Reacher informs Duffy that the DEA safe house had to be burned down, but at least he was able to accomplish his plan. Reacher tells Duffy that Beck confirmed that McCabe is behind all of this, but when Duffy shows him the picture of McCabe, Reacher recognizes him as his old foe, Xavier Quinn, the guy he thought he killed. Duffy gets angry that Reacher isn't opening up about what Quinn did, which makes Reacher finally spill the beans on what happened in the past. 12 years ago, Reacher was working on a tedious case about a military weapons specialist named Roland Gorofsky selling top-secret weapon blueprints. Sergeant Dominique Cole, a very hard-working woman, is assigned to Reacher to help with the case. Cole was able to figure that the exchange of documents was taking place at a park. Gorofsky was able to trick them at the park, but they captured and interrogated him. That's when Gorofsky confesses that it was Quinn who was blackmailing him and forcing him to leak all those blueprints while holding his 4-year-old daughter captive. Private Tony Frasconi also helps in the investigation by bringing Quinn's phone records to Cole. According to the phone records, Quinn was in cahoots with this man named Safwan Qasim, a Syrian national with military ties, possibly the man that Quinn is selling all those military secrets to. Reacher, Cole, and Frasconi managed to arrest Safwan Qasim and get really close to finishing this case, but people think that Reacher did all the work and Cole was there just for the ride, which Reacher really hated. So Reacher decides to move forward with the case in such a way that Cole gets the credit and praise she deserves for her work on the case. Qasim gives up and helps the military obtain the classified documents from Quinn. Reacher and Cole were able to confirm that the documents being sold were the real deal, and with all the evidence they've got on Quinn, there is no way he can get out of this. Seeing that the case is good as completed, Reacher wants Cole to make the arrest herself so she can get the spotlight, but this happens to be his biggest regret in his military career. Cole takes Frasconi to Quinn's house to make the arrest, but Reacher notices that it's been way too long and Cole hasn't reported back anything. He gets progressively more worried and decides to text her, but the reply he gets from her confirms that something is very wrong. Reacher had told Cole not to refer to him as sir since day one, but the reply that Cole sent ended with that same word, sir. Reacher and the military police head to Quinn's house only to find Frasconi's dead body and nothing else. Quinn had taken Cole somewhere else and was probably torturing her for information, which was going to be brutal since Quinn is a total psychopath with severe mental issues. Reacher tries working out clues and comes to the conclusion that Quinn is probably keeping Cole at his weekend home in Linton. He heads towards Linton while the military tries to track down the exact address of Quinn's weekend home. The military tracks down the address and Reacher arrives at Quinn's location to end this case once and for all. Reacher's nightmare comes to life when he enters a barn at the property and finds Cole's body devoid of life with every sort of cruelty and punishment adorned on it. Reacher was both furious and sad, but this gave him more reason to make sure Quinn suffers even more. Reacher gets Quinn and takes him to the edge of a cliff with a turbulent river flowing underneath. He then shoots Quinn with his own small caliber gun, but apparently it had missed Quinn's brain. Reacher thought that he had killed Quinn, but that certainly wasn't the case. After he is done telling the story, Duffy mentions how she never paid Teresa to go undercover, but instead used fake threats of a prison sentence which she bought. Duffy feels really guilty and makes it her duty to make sure she gets Teresa back well and alive. Reacher goes back to the house where he asks Agnes and Annette about the kind of people that will be showing up on Beck's birthday party. Apparently Beck hates people from work and he has no real friends. Agnes even goes as far as to call that old fart a lonely Beck. The next morning, Reacher spots Richard boxing and decides to help him out, and in the meantime, Duffy and Villanueva hit the road and try to check the warehouses of all the warehouses associated with Bazaar to see if they can find Teresa there and eventually stop at a tubing facility. Beck calls Reacher and tells him that Angel's laptop has a tracking app which showed that the laptop was last seen at a facility, the same one where Duffy and Villanueva are. Beck had already sent 3 guys to kill the people who had the laptop and sends Reacher for good measure as well. Reacher slams the gas and heads towards the facility, trying to get in contact with Duffy to warn her, but to no avail. Duffy and Villanueva had entered the warehouse and had no idea that there were men sent to kill them. The 3 men arrive at the warehouse before Reacher does and head in. Reacher zooms to the tubing facility and calls Elliot to inform him of the situation. Since Duffy isn't picking up her phone, Elliot decides to call the company's phone inside the facility to reach Duffy. Harley and 2 guys enter the facility where they spot Duffy and Villanueva. The phone also starts ringing at the same time. Duffy finds it odd that the phone is ringing while the facility is closed and decides to pick the call. Elliot quickly informs Duffy that Quinn sent people after her and that they're at the facility. The whole thing turns into a shootout and moments later, Reacher also arrives at the scene. Reacher takes one of the men out while Duffy kills the other but drops her badge. Reacher sneaks up on Duffy and tells her to leave from the south exit because if they kill Harley too, it'll be way too suspicious that Reacher's the only survivor. While Duffy and Villanueva run from the facility, Reacher picks up Duffy's badge. Duffy and Villanueva get away in their cars, tossing the laptop out, and Reacher picks Harley up in the Audi but purposefully gets it stuck in the mud so his friends can get away. Reacher and Harley come back to the house where they dump the bodies of the men who died in the facility into the ocean. The violent undertow of the tide flushes the bodies away like it's nothing. Reacher then calls Duffy, who informs him that she and Villanueva have split up to check the addresses on the laptop to cover more ground, and Reacher tells her that he found her badge and that he'll give it back when they see each other. He also mentions that Quinn is starting to notice the feds are looking into his operation. Meanwhile, Reacher sips on expensive coffee that literally comes from a cat's butt. It's called civet coffee, look it up. Quinn had sent 2 guys to look after things in the house, but one of them starts creeping Annette out, but Reacher defends her. Reacher then heads back into his room and hides Duffy's badge in his pillow covers. Annette then comes to his room with a piece of cake and a note that reads "Merci." Cute. Back at the lodge, that dumbass kid Elliot makes a crucial mistake. He lets Cooper have a cig, but Cooper has other plans. As Elliot leans in to light it, Cooper secretly takes a sip of the alcohol sitting on the table in front of him. The moment Elliot gets close, Cooper spits the booze onto the flame, blinding Elliot for the time being. With Elliot in excruciating pain, Cooper kicks him to death, leaves the lodge, and takes off in the car. Duffy comes back to the lodge and notices that the car is missing and that the door is opened. She heads inside only to find Elliot's lifeless body on the ground. Duffy immediately calls Reacher and informs him that Cooper killed Elliot and that he's probably on his way to Beck's mansion to rat Reacher out. Reacher quickly thinks of a plan to save his skin and to make sure that Elliot's death isn't in vain. Reacher then calls Villanueva and tells him to do just as he's told. If he doesn't follow his orders, then Elliot would have died for nothing. Duffy heads to the power transformer and blows it up with her gun, giving Reacher a valid reason to leave Beck's residence and check the issue out. Reacher lies to Beck that the power outage is probably caused by Angel's men and that he's heading to the road that leads to the residence to make sure that no one is trying to use the outage as an opportunity to sneak in. Reacher leaves to meet up with Villanueva, but at the house, Quinn orders Beck to have the entire staff searched. Reacher meets up with Villanueva and they flip Villy's car in the middle of the road to make it look like an accident. Reacher thinks that if Cooper sees an old man inside a flipped car, he'll come out and try to help. Reacher's cover almost gets blown when Harley comes to his room to search for anything suspicious. Quite a bad time to be hiding a badge inside his pillow covers. Meanwhile, Cooper drives to the road and sees a car flipped over with an old man inside. He steps out to check if he's still alive, but that's when Reacher shoots Cooper in the head. Reacher flips the car back over and heads back to the house, while Duffy calls the DEA and informs Elliot's dad about his passing. At the house, Reacher notices that everyone is gathered in Beck's office and starts getting nervous when Beck mentions that there's an imposter among them. Beck says that someone was with the Fed sending them information on his operation. Reacher gets even more nervous, but it turns out that the imposter was Annette of all people. Polly had killed Annette and Reacher is asked to throw her body into the ocean, but not before getting smacked in the face by Polly. Reacher then calls Duffy, informing her that the maid was ATF and was killed. He then tells her that he's figured it all out. Quinn is not transporting drugs, but rather high-end, untraceable guns. Beck had hired a mechanic, a gun tester undercover, and one of the addresses on Angel's laptop was a lubricant company, which was probably bought to make sure that the guns are in perfect working order before being sold to the buyers. They already found out that Quinn had a big sale coming up. Now they know that it was for guns. The next morning, Beck comes to Reacher's room and says that he and Reacher have been summoned to the warehouse, only them. Before Reacher sets out with Beck, he heads to the bathroom and calls Duffy, briefing her on what just happened. It's Quinn who had summoned them. Duffy asks Reacher not to do anything rash and keep his phone on so they can listen in on the conversation. It's finally time to see if Quinn was faking his amnesia or was it legit. As Reacher and Beck pull up to the warehouse, Duffy and Villanueva stake out the place. Reacher heads inside with Beck and sees all the guns being inspected and being placed inside crates. When Beck asks Reacher if he's ready to meet the boss, Reacher replies that he's been waiting for this moment for a long time now, pulling out his gun from his pants. Reacher meets Quinn in the warehouse and confirms that he really does have amnesia. Quinn takes his anger out on Beck but doesn't kill him because the clients expect him to be there as well at the time of the transaction. Quinn chews Beck out for the f*** up but takes a liking to Reacher for saving his operation multiple times. Reacher spots a dress being taken inside, which Quinn confirms to be for Teresa. Good news, Teresa's alive. Bad news, she's being used as a deal sweetener for the client so they don't get pissed too much about the delays. While all this goes down, Toktarov and his men show up outside the warehouse and Harley takes a bag of cash to his car. Toktarov is the person whom Quinn had borrowed money from, but now Quinn's under pressure, because not only is he slow in returning the money, his gun sale is also behind schedule. Toktarov is a powerful figure in the Russian mafia, someone even Quinn is scared of. Toktarov drives away while Quinn orders his men to look into anyone trying to investigate his operation and take them out. Duffy and Villanueva head to the dress shop and get the number of the person who placed the order, but get no answer. Back at the house, Reacher calls Duffy, telling her that he'll be in town for an hour and goes over to talk to Richard, telling him that if he bought the cap gun for his dad, might as well get some glue to fix the crack in it caused by his bullies. Reacher sends Richard to get the glue while he meets up with Duffy in an alleyway and returns her badge. Duffy tells Reacher that Villanueva has a contact with someone who works with a service provider, and that they might be able to help figure out the call logs. Duffy thanks Reacher for not killing his enemy when he was face to face with him, and suddenly Gurley just grabs him and kisses him. And then she gets mad at herself for doing it. Anyways, Villanueva shows up too, but Reacher tells him to get away because he was the cop that Reacher faked to shoot during the staged kidnapping. The worst thing then happens. Richard recognizes Villanueva and the cat comes out of the bag. Meanwhile, in Rock Creek, Virginia, Quinn sends his men to torture and interrogate Powell, the officer who looked up Quinn's plate for Reacher. Quinn had also sent 2 men to take Neagley out in her office in Chicago. Neagley takes out both the attackers sent to kill her. Quinn then orders his men in Virginia to cut Powell and let him bleed out. What a psycho. The second guy that Neegly shoots begs her to call an ambulance as life slowly fades from his body, but she asks for the name of the person who hired him first before calling an ambulance. Kostopoulos was the man who hired the hitters to go after Neegly. She calls Reacher to inform him that Kostopoulos had sent over some guys to kill her, but she's doing okay. Reacher realizes that Quinn's men are going to go after everyone who's been looking into his operation and cuts the line in a hurry. "You're an ambulance," says Neegly, and the poor man dies. Reacher calls the 110th and informs them to send 3 armed men to Powell's house to make sure he's okay, but it's too late. Just then, Beck spots Quinn's car speeding into his driveway and gets worried. Quinn had found out that one officer from the 110th Powell flagged the plate of his car, while an ex-110th member was looking into the men he hired for his operations. Beck reveals to Quinn that Reacher was the part of the 110th and sends Polly to shoot him down, but Reacher had already escaped. Reacher takes the plow truck and drives off the property, but his ride gets shot to shit. He is forced to call Duffy and say to come pick him up from the road down from Beck's property, adding that his cover has been blown. Quinn then sends his men on quad bikes to come and get him. Reacher, however, cuts the line and hides in the woods. He takes out all the guys one by one, Reacher style, and escapes to a laundromat where he pays an old couple to keep him undercover for the night. Polly reaches the woods to find out that Reacher had killed all of Quinn's men and escaped. Polly comes back and informs Quinn that Reacher had escaped, which pisses Quinn off, and he forces Richard to play Russian roulette in front of Beck. Richard survives, but Quinn cuts off Beck's ear. While with Reacher and Villanueva, Duffy says that they should just ask the ATF for help and get Quinn raided. But Reacher mentions how Quinn would have changed up his entire procedure now that he knows that the secret's out. Villanueva also comes in with the information that the calls to the dress shop originated from a place called Port Rome, which is probably where Teresa's being kept. But they won't know for sure unless they go there in person and check it out. Reacher confidently says that he thinks that Teresa might be on a boat in Port Rome, and he recognizes the number as Harley's. The 3 of them show up at the docks and find one small boat anchored away from the rest. Reacher and Duffy swim to the boat and find traces of someone being tied up there. This was most likely Teresa. Harley then approaches in his speedboat, but Duffy and Reacher catch him and set the boat ablaze in the process. Harley reveals that Quinn was paying him to keep Teresa with him, but now that the cover's been blown, he wanted to keep Teresa at a place he could see her personally, not sure where though. Reacher and Duffy leave Harley to die on his boat while they take the speedboat and zoom back to the coast. Back on land, Teresa is mad that their final lead didn't give them much information, but Reacher tells her that they still have someone on the inside of Quinn's operation, but that person just doesn't know it yet. After saying this, Reacher tells Duffy to get ready because they're heading to LA. Reacher and Duffy head to Boston, where they stop by Teresa's grandmother's place to check up on her. That old lady is still full of life, but also worried sick about her granddaughter. In Illinois, Neegly finds Kostopoulos and gets info out of him. Kostopoulos reveals that he was just Quinn's fixer and that this is not the first time Quinn had killed an entire family trying to protect his shady dealings. Back in Chicago, Quinn had already taken over a family-run export business 5 years ago, but when the family had had enough of Quinn's bullshit, they threatened to report him to the authorities, but that only prompted Quinn to kill everyone in that family, even the kids. While in LA, Duffy and Reacher go over the footage they obtained of Darian Prado's illegal dealings. As they go over the footage, Reacher finds something that immensely helps them with their investigation. Things get hot between Reacher and Duffy, even though she wanted to keep things professional. Poor Roscoe and Dixon. The next day, Reacher and Duffy track down Darian and force him to take them to his gallery. Once inside, Reacher lays it all out for him. Darian has already committed 2 violent felonies, and one more means a guaranteed life sentence. Before he can protest, Duffy pulls out her laptop and plays a video of Darian hanging a disabled parking tag in his car, letting him take up a spot meant for disabled people. Reacher doesn't stop there. He reveals that they know Darian threatened a doctor into falsifying a diagnosis of severe knee arthritis. That threat, it counts as another violent felony. Darian's screwed. Reacher gives him a choice. Either he helps them by faking a deal with Beck for the guns, or they turn him in. Darian has no real choice, so he plays along, but in the end he still gets screwed over. The next morning in Maine, Neegly poses as an agent from Darian's side, waiting for Beck. When he arrives, she keeps up the act, playing along with the fake gun deal while steering the conversation toward what really matters. From a distance, Reacher, Duffy, and Villanueva watch closely. Neegly tells Beck that Reacher is his last hope, and if he wants to survive Quinn, he needs to trust Reacher and give him the details on the big buy. Beck admits he doesn't know much, only that the deal is going today, and that the buyers are flying in from Yemen on a private airfield that same day. Neegly pushes him to find out the exact time and location if he wants to get himself and his son out of this alive. To keep up appearances, Neegly and Beck stage a fake fallout over price negotiations and part ways. But now Beck is in, he's working with Reacher and the team to take down Quinn's gun-running operation from the inside. At an unknown location, Quinn steps out of his car and heads into a cellar carrying food for Teresa. But it's not just food, he makes sure to keep her subdued for the buyers. Meanwhile, Neegly joins the team and they go over the plan while having lunch. Duffy reaches out to her contacts at the FAA to track down the private jet from Yemen. Stepping aside, Neegly and Reacher quietly weigh the risks. This mission isn't like Margrave or New York. Quinn is ex-military, and the high-end firepower he has could tear them apart. Their odds of success look low. Back at Beck's residence, he walks in on Richard fixing up the cap gun. They share a rare heartfelt moment. Beck genuinely cares for his son, and for once it shows. He apologizes for being a bad father, for failing to support him after Richard's mother passed away. In return, Richard hands Beck the cap gun and the two embrace. Duffy's FAA contact comes through, pinpointing where the buyer's plane landed. Neagley picks up the trail, following them as they head to an upscale inn and spa. At the same time, Beck meets Quinn at his office. When he tries to press Quinn for details about the deal, Quinn hesitates but finally spills. The buy is going down at the salvage yard at 9 p.m., right in the middle of Beck's birthday party. The perfect distraction. Neagley follows the buyers to their hotel, keeping a close eye. Reacher gets a call from Beck, confirming the location and time of the deal. Beck has placed all his hopes on Reacher, praying he and Richard make it out alive. Reacher shares the intel with Duffy and Villanueva, but tension flares when Duffy suggests bringing in the ATF. There's no way they can take down Quinn's operation alone. Reacher shuts that down immediately. If the ATF gets involved, he won't get the chance to make Quinn pay for what he did to Cole. The argument escalates and Reacher storms out for some coffee. Realizing they don't have a choice, Duffy and Villanueva take the case to the ATF. The meeting is a mess. Duffy is furious that the ATF wants to cut them out of the operation, and the ATF is pissed that they were brought in so late. After a heated back and forth, a compromise is made. The ATF will handle the bust at the salvage yard and any follow-up investigations. Duffy's team has to sit this one out, confined to the ATF's surveillance van with strict orders not to engage. Reacher isn't on board, but Duffy and Villanueva don't have a choice. As the night sets in, Beck oversees the final party preparations, tying Richard's bow tie. But their moment is cut short when Quinn barges in, yanking Beck away and sending him to the salvage yard. Outside, the ATF moves into position, waiting for the deal to unfold. Inside the surveillance van, Duffy and Villanueva watch as Reacher steps out, heading straight for the trunk of her car. He pulls out a sniper rifle. Turns out when Reacher left for coffee, he actually went out and bought himself a rifle. Duffy follows him outside, but one look at his face tells her there's no changing his mind. She sighs and heads back to the van. A convoy of bizarre trucks and two black cars pull into the salvage yard. Reacher takes his position and dials Neagley. He tells her to erase all traces of her being associated with him once this is over, because he's about to do something that'll make him government enemy number one. Then something clicks. He tells her the buyers just arrived, but Neagley quickly corrects him that she's been tailing the buyers since they left the inn. Reacher realizes that he has been played. The salvage yard isn't where the deal is happening, it's a trap. The real buyers are heading straight for Beck's house, where Neagley is tailing them. Reacher orders Neagley to keep tailing the real buyers while he tries to figure something out. It's the final phase of this plan, but things take a sudden turn for the worse. Reacher doesn't have time to explain the situation and trusts Neagley to figure it out on her own. Beck steps out of his car and realizes none of the buyers are there. Reacher starts picking off Quinn's men, and the whole thing escalates into a shootout between them and the ATF. Duffy and Villanueva grab their bulletproof vests and jump into the action. Once most of the bodies hit the ground, Reacher regroups with Duffy and Villanueva, saving Beck in the process. Beck admits he was set up too, and he had no idea the real deal was happening at the party. Teresa is also there at the house, drugged out of her mind and locked in a room upstairs. Reacher forces one of Quinn's men to send a message saying everything's fine and they're heading back to the party. Quinn, unaware that his trap was completely wasted, roams the party without a care. Reacher calls Neagley, who's hiding in the bushes outside Beck's residence, and tells her that everyone except him, Duffy, Villanueva, Beck, and one of Quinn's men are dead. Since the weapons in the trucks are still needed at the house, they'll be bringing them back. Neagley confirms the guests have arrived, the deal hasn't been made yet, and asks what they're going to do about that monster of a gatekeeper, Polly, who looks like a bloodthirsty pit bull on roids. Reacher tells her to leave Polly to him. Reacher makes Quinn's man drive the truck, picking up Neagley on the way, while Villanueva struggles to drive the other truck to the location. Quinn greets Nasser, the client, and hands him the key to Teresa's room. The trucks arrive at the residence but aren't parked correctly, which prompts Polly to come over and check things out. Reacher kills the driver and stays behind to deal with Polly while the others follow Beck into the house through a shortcut. The long-awaited Reacher versus Polly fight finally begins, and it's everything one could hope for. Neagley blends in as a waiter and heads to the venue, while Villanueva focuses on keeping Richard safe and Duffy searches for Teresa. Beck hands Duffy a skeleton key that unlocks every door in the house. Neagley hunts for Quinn while Reacher and Polly trade brutal blows, crashing into the carriage house. Polly gets the upper hand, strangling Reacher, but Reacher gouges his eye. The struggle knocks over a wooden pillar, sending hundreds of pounds of fertilizer crashing down on both of them. While searching for Richard, Villanueva runs into a waiter and backs him into the bathroom, but the guy puts up a fight. Meanwhile, Polly claws his way out from under the fertilizer, wraps a chain around Reacher's neck and hangs him from the wooden ceiling of the carriage house. As Polly walks away, Reacher fights through the pain, rips the pulley from the ceiling and frees himself. Richard hears the commotion and rushes to the bathroom, finding a victorious but bloody Villanueva. Reacher and Polly, both desperate, continue their fight. The struggle takes them to the water, to the area used by Harley to dispose of the bodies. Even underwater, they try to kill each other. but the strong current pulls them deeper. Reacher punches Polly in the throat, stunning him and letting him sink into the ocean like the Titanic. Reacher swims back to land while Duffy searches for Teresa. While Neagley looks for Quinn, a waiter spots her acting suspiciously, but she lies her way out of it. When she returns, Quinn is gone. He must have realized the feds are onto him, and the deal needs to happen immediately. As Reacher approaches the house, Polly, stubborn as ever, comes back for more. Reacher lures him to his guardhouse where he removes a bullet from the chamber of Polly's automatic gun. Polly snatches the gun, thinking he has the upper hand, but when he pulls the trigger, the barrel backfires, sending shrapnel into his throat. This time he's dead for good. Duffy finds Teresa's room and waits in hiding. When Nasser enters, she catches him at gunpoint. Meanwhile, Reacher storms the barn where the weapons are stored, grabs a shotgun and starts mowing down enemies. The blasts alert everyone, giving Duffy the perfect opportunity to take out both Nasser and his bodyguard to get Teresa to safety. Reacher is on an absolute rampage, cutting down Quinn's men without hesitation. The chaos spreads to the party, and Quinn, realizing things are going sideways, shoots the client's men, sending the guests into a panic. Duffy uses the commotion to get Teresa to safety while Neagley keeps Quinn occupied in a firefight. Villanueva urges Richard to take a different exit, but Quinn intercepts him and drags him to his office. That's when Beck storms in, pointing his cap gun at Quinn. The epoxy on the barrel hadn't dried properly, and it starts falling apart. Quinn notices and unloads his gun into Beck, killing him. But as Quinn is busy filling Beck with holes, Richard grabs an Uzi and sprays the room, forcing Quinn to retreat. Quinn bolts for the exit, but Reacher is right behind him. Just as he makes it outside, Taktarov and his men arrive, surrounding him. Reacher tells Taktarov that he has unfinished business with Quinn, but Taktarov threatens him. That's when Reacher's friends step out, evening the odds. Neagley appears with the money taken from Nasser's men and offers Taktarov a deal: take the cash and leave Quinn. The Russians accept and disappear, leaving Quinn completely alone, one-on-one with Reacher, just as it should be. Quinn still doesn't recognize Reacher, but the moment he hears Cole's first name, Dominique, the memories come rushing back. He finally realizes why Reacher has come for him. With a smirk, Reacher pulls the trigger, blowing Quinn's face clean off. This time he made sure the caliber wasn't too small. The next morning, the police arrive to clean up the mess. Reacher gives Richard what he always wanted, a chance to drive away from his father's house free, with a bag full of cash in the seat next to him. Duffy loses her job at the DEA but is ready to move on, both from the job and from Reacher. Still, she's grateful they accomplished what they set out to do. Villanueva finally decides it's time to retire and enjoy life with his wife. Duffy takes Teresa to her grandmother's house, ensuring she's safe and free from the nightmare she endured. With nothing left to tie him down, Reacher grabs a kick-ass motorcycle from Beck's garage and rides off into the distance in classic Reacher style. Thanks for watching this entire video and staying until the end. If you enjoy recaps like these, hit that subscribe button, and as always, stay awesome and take care.